creates our future. Now one company with vision has created a range of widescreen televisions unlike any that have been before. Grundig.
2002, Korea, Japan. You will see every game. You will get analysis by experts. The biggest sporting event in the world, treated with the respect it deserves. The World Cup, 48 games and more on SBS.
This is the story of the rise and fall of Egypt's Golden Empire.
Sunday night, a new series celebrating the most wondrous pharaohs in the Egyptian New Kingdom, Ramesses the Great, Tutankhamen and Nefertiti.
It is a story brought to life by their own words and those of the ordinary men and women who would change the course of history. In eyewitness accounts, soldiers describe the birth of an empire forged on the battlefield. Pharaohs record how they created their own legends and became the richest rulers in the world.
Egypt's Golden Empire premieres Sunday at 7:30.
Must leave their homeland in order to save it. A powerful film about patriotism, friendship,
I didn't come to see him,
and passion from Jan Sverak, the Academy Award-winning director of Kolya, A Dark Blue World.
McDonald's new taste menu now brings you the tantalising flavours of India.
Try a tandoori chicken burger, marinated chicken and crispy lettuce with a sauce of mint and the taste of yogurt, all on toasted naan bread.
Or go for McDonald's new vegetable curry puffs with just the right amount of spice.
So get the taste of the world.
Right here in Australia with McDonald's new taste menu.
Things that make you go, mmm.
The new Renault Laguna with Renault card ignition, automatic climate control, world best safety features, sequential shift, 5-speed automatic, 3-litre V6 engine, and from just $46,990. It's proof that not all cars are created equal. Renault. We don't just make cars, we create cars.
the Straits of the Dardanelles, or Straits of Çanakkale, as they are called in Turkey. Here the world witnessed one of its bloodiest and most tragic battles. The bodies of 500,000 young men who never had any quarrel with each other became part of this soil, host to so many civilizations.
Heroes who shed their blood and lost their lives on this soil. You're now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Rest in peace here. To us, there's no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets, where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. Mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are sleeping in peace. When they lost their lives on this land, they became our sons as well.
For the people of the Ottoman Empire, the First World War began far away, just as it did for the Anzacs. It began with the British refusing to deliver two dreadnoughts, the Sultan Osman and the Reşadiye, which the Ottomans had ordered from the Armstrong Whitworth shipyard in Newcastle. The ships had already been paid for. The money was raised by public subscription. Ordinary people had pinned their hopes on these two battleships to restore the fortunes of the collapsing Ottoman Empire. August the 3rd, 1914. It was Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, who pushed for the ships to be requisitioned. Renamed the Agincourt and the Erin, they served with the Royal Navy throughout the war. Germany, on which Britain declared war on the 4th of August, saw an opportunity to drag the Ottomans into the war on its side. They sent two cruisers, the Goeben and the Breslau, to replace the ships withheld by the British. Under the command of Admiral Souchon, the German ships arrived at the mouth of the Dardanelles Straits on the 10th of August, with British and French battleships in hot pursuit. Taking refuge inside the straits, the German ships sailed on all the way to the Ottoman capital, Constantinople. For the Germans, the Dardanelles were an escape route. For the British and French, who arrived 4 hours later, they were like a wall standing across the sea. In Constantinople, modern Istanbul, the German ships joined the Ottoman navy. Renamed the Yavuz and the Midilli, with their German crews now wearing the Ottoman fez, they set sail for the Black Sea. On the 29th of October, they bombarded a number of Russian ports. The next day, the British, French and Russian governments issued ultimatums to the Ottoman Empire. There was no response. From now on, guns would do the talking.
The enemy warships launched their first attack. The sea was full of ships. It was almost impossible to see the water. Their fleet, all battleships of various sizes, approached the Dardanelles and fired at our entrance forts. After hundreds of salvos, they withdrew. We were caught unprepared. We realized they were trying to test our strength.
On that day, the 3rd of November, 1914, the first Turkish soldiers fell in a struggle that would last for months. In Constantinople, there was panic, with people rushing to the banks. By contrast, in London, there was jubilation. And yet,
a considerable time passed, probably months. We worked hard preparing for the big attack, but the enemy was not to be seen. Sometimes a patrol boat would fire a couple of salvos and disappear. We wished that whatever was to happen would happen. If fate meant us to die, we would. Death was not what worried us, but this wait was very distressing. Our commanders said, "Just wait, those scoundrels will come."
While the Turks looked to their defenses, the Allied fleet wasn't idle. Though their political masters were confident of reaching Constantinople in 3 days, the officers were studying the currents in the straits, working out how to penetrate the minefields. Vice Admiral Sackville-Carden, commanding the British fleet, ordered a trial run by submarine. This led to the first Allied victory of the campaign. The submarine B-11 penetrated deep inside the straits, and there she found the oldest battleship in the Ottoman Navy, the Mesudye, moored to guard the minefield. The commander of the B-11, Lieutenant Holbrook, immediately torpedoed her.
It was around lunchtime. We were shaken violently. When I ran to the deck with much excitement and speed, I saw the ship was tilting towards the port side. The small cannons were firing at an invisible target. It was all very chaotic. The steamboats and steam tugs arrived from Çanakkale. They first rescued the men in the water, then us.
The Mesudye capsized with her mast stuck in the sand 15 meters down. Her keel remained on the surface. Master welders from Constantinople were able to rescue a number of men trapped inside the ship. That 13th of December, the Mesudye took 34 brave Turkish seamen with her. Not only men were rescued, naval guns salvaged from the Mesudye were used in a shore battery. Named after the ship, the Mesudye battery played an important part in the campaign. The tense wait came to an end on the 19th of February, 1915, when the Allied fleet began to steam towards the Dardanelles. At 9:51, HMS Cornwallis opened fire on the fortifications between Sedulbahir and Yeni Shehir. I gave the first order to fire and we hit our targets even with the first rounds.
Light and heavy destroyers, cruisers, and some midget ships pounded us from early morning until sunset. They also had airplanes constantly dropping bombs. I would guess anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 shells fell.
Fort number 1 exploded into rocks, dust and fire. When we received fire from another fort, we shifted our attention to it. I don't recall having a better time in all my life.
We had a few dead and some injured. However, there were huge holes all around our forts. We weren't idle either. We hit 2 of their larger battleships. Later, those ships moved away.
The lack of success on the first day and an ensuing storm were early signs that the Dardanelles would not be passed easily. Admiral Carden wrote, "The weather is extremely unfavorable and the sea is terribly rough. I do not want to start an attack under such conditions." The storm gave the Turks a chance to recover, but on the 25th of February, calm weather gave the Allies fresh hope. Admiral Guéprat, commanding the French fleet, wrote, "Today is unique. 8 British and 4 French battleships opened fire on the forts at the entrance to the straits. They responded at first, but were eventually silenced. The village of Sedulbahir is in flames."
All was lost. All was destroyed. I looked around with great grief and sighed, viewing our once glorious fort with a heavy heart. I then left our disaster-stricken fort with the sadness of those who leave behind their beloved.
Admiral Carden was now confident. He wired the good news to London. "Weather permitting, we will be in Constantinople in 2 weeks." After the shelling, demolition parties landed to destroy what was left of the forts at Kumkale and Sedulbahir. However, they found they could not be silenced. In addition, the 11 lines of mines, 403 in all, still posed a threat to the Allied fleet. And the Turkish light artillery, transformed into a mobile force, was another surprise. Though it posed no threat to the battleships, the light artillery was important in keeping the much smaller minesweepers at bay. The intensive Turkish artillery fire hit a number of trawlers, originally built for whaling, now used as minesweepers, and sent them into the depths of history. The Lundy has been on her long, silent voyage for 85 years now. We don't know the fate and whereabouts of many similar craft. We only have the wreck of the Lundy and memories of the men who lived on boats like her. When we got into the Dardanelles, we found 5 brilliant searchlights working. When the Canopus got close, she opened fire on the lights. We were fired on from all sides. The fire was wild and the Canopus was not hit. But for all the good we did towards dousing the searchlights, we might just as well have been firing at the moon in the sky. Minesweepers often fell victim to the mines they were trying to clear. When this happened, the others would be forced to withdraw. Before dawn on the 8th of March, the Turkish mine layer, Nusret, commanded by Captain Hakkı, set 26 copper mines 100 meters apart along the eastern shore of the straits, just in front of the Karanlık Liman Harbour. This stretch of water had already been swept by the Allies and was thought to be clear. This one mission by the tiny Nusret was to have a greater impact than all of the battleships put together. Churchill commented, "In 1915, the lives of millions were at stake in Europe and many large-scale attacks were launched. 2 to 3 million troops were dead or wounded and 4 to 5,000 warships were at sea. However, none of these so contributed to the continuation of the war and the future prospects of the enemy as the mines laid by the Nusret." As First Lord of the Admiralty, Churchill insisted on continuing with naval attacks without committing troops to gain control of the forts. The pressures he brought to bear drove Admiral Carden into a nervous breakdown. On the 17th of March, Rear Admiral John de Robeck, Carden's deputy, took over as Commander-in-Chief. Eyewitnesses wrote that the 18th of March dawned somewhat foggy but very beautiful. The Allied plan had 3 stages. First, the outer fortifications were to be silenced. Then, the minesweepers were to clear a path to the Narrows, the strategic bottleneck at the northeastern end of the straits, and there the battleships would shell the forts from close range and break their resistance. The first surprise of the day was a German reconnaissance aircraft which took off from the Turkish side. It was proof that Turkish resources were not as backward as the Allies had thought. The pilot, Karl Schneider, recalled, "We approached the straits at an altitude of 1,600 meters and eventually saw the enemy. Admiral de Robeck's flagship, the Inflexible, was in the lead, followed by the Queen Elizabeth, the Lord Nelson, the Agamemnon, the Majestic, and the Triumph." In the meantime, the French fleet under Admiral Guéprat, consisting of the Gaulois, the Charlemagne, the Bouvet, and the Suffren, was weighing anchor at the mouth of the straits. At first, all that could be heard from the battleships was war songs. Then, for over 2 hours, the guns thundered. The first stage of the operation was successful. The Kumkale and Sedulbahir forts were silenced. Both sides of the straits were ablaze, and, with euphoria rising, the British and French began a race for Constantinople. But the Turkish artillery, thought to have been buried, soon recovered and resumed firing. 2 battleships had to withdraw with heavy damage. Agamemnon hit 12 times in 25 minutes and Gaulois badly hit below the waterline.
We directed our fire to the French flagship and scored several hits. Just when we saw fire under her broadside, foretop and bridge, she hoisted the emergency flag and quickly moved towards the Bouvet.
With the French fleet in difficulty, Admiral Guéprat signaled for it to retire. It seemed Turkish fortunes were changing. Then a tremendous explosion shook the Bouvet. The gigantic Bouvet, which had sped with such ease into the Dardanelles that morning, now slipped just as quickly beneath its waves. Next in line was Inflexible. She hit a mine and was heavily damaged at a point very close to where Bouvet was hit. While Inflexible was withdrawing, Irresistible was hoisting the green flag. She too had hit a mine. And in the late afternoon, 2 Anatolian men managed to reactivate the wrecked Megidia fort. The 600-pound shells were loaded into the cannons on the back of Seyit with the assistance of Ali. On his 3rd try, Seyit succeeded in hitting the battleship Ocean, which had earlier killed all his comrades. Ocean lost her steering control and, just like Irresistible and Bouvet, fell into the trap of the mines. Today, Irresistible lies at the bottom of the Çanakkale Straits, along with Bouvet and Ocean. The huge losses the Allied fleet suffered on the 18th of March stemmed directly from the failure to ensure the straits were clear of mines. The same failure would also cause a great family tragedy. Admiral Gebhardt had honored his son Captain Gebhardt by giving him the mission of sweeping the mines. However, as a result of the defeat, Captain Gebhardt would be court-martialed. The presiding judge was none other than his father, Admiral Gebhardt. The verdict was read out. It has been decided unanimously that Captain Gebhardt should face the death penalty. Captain Gebhardt, exhausted, could utter only one word: Father. We now know that it wasn't only the Irresistible that hit the mines and sank that 18th of March. So did the grand dreams with which the day had dawned. Yet the operation had to continue. Churchill's original plan to force the Dardanelles using the navy alone was now abandoned. The new plan called for a land force to seize the Gallipoli Peninsula on the western side of the straits. Control of the peninsula would finally clear the way for the navy to pass through the straits, enter the Sea of Marmara, and take Constantinople. To seize the Gallipoli Peninsula would require a major build-up and rigorous training. For this reason, operations were temporarily transferred from the small Greek island of Lemnos to Alexandria in Egypt. On the 27th, General Sir Ian Hamilton, Commander-in-Chief of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, followed his troops to Egypt. Here, the build-up continued and the training was completed. The invasion fleet sailed from Lemnos on the 23rd of April. By the evening of the 24th, it was off the coast of Gallipoli. The colonel said, "God bless you, boys. Tomorrow night by this time, most of you will be dead."
In a few hours, all hell will break loose. But now, everybody's cheerful. Some playing cards, others singing, and some writing letters like me. No one would believe there's a war going on a couple of miles away. You can expect another letter from me when we reach the Golden Horn.
Hamilton had written a letter too. It was read to the troops as they waited for the landing to begin.
Soldiers of France and the King, before us lies an adventure unprecedented in modern war. We are about to force a landing upon an open beach in face of positions vaunted by our enemy as impregnable. Remember, Once you set foot upon the Gallipoli Peninsula, you must fight the thing through to a finish. The whole world will be watching your progress. Let us prove ourselves worthy of the great deed of arms entrusted to us.
At 3:40 a.m. on the 25th of April, the ships came to within 3 kilometers of the shore and released the ropes of the landing boats. With night giving way to early morning, the assault was underway. But already there was a problem. Strong currents around the peninsula swept many of the boats far from their planned landing points.
This was the last place one could possibly decide to land. But we were approaching the shore and day was breaking so fast that I finally made for the steep slope in front of me in desperation.
That small beach at the foot of the steep slope was one of the first landing points. The slopes that the troops first noticed as dark shadows now loomed in front of them like walls. And just as the Sphinx guarded the tombs of ancient pharaohs, the spur the Anzacs dubbed the Sphinx would guard their graves forever.
Shrapnel was raining down on us. When the boat in front of us reached the shore, we were still in water approximately 3 to 5 feet deep. Someone said jump. We were surrounded with the dead and wounded of the 3rd Brigade. I felt that bullet going right past me. Then another one. And another. And the 4th shot from the Turks hit my arm. Right after I was hit, my helmsman was seriously wounded.
The deck was ringing with the sound of shots. The Australians were singing "Australia will be there" and rowing really hard. Many of them lost their rifles in the excitement of jumping off the boats. I saw them attacking up the slopes with their bayonets.
There were 2 Turks at a machine gun post. Our boats were right in front of them. I watched them for a few seconds until they saw us and got their machine gun ready. At this point, a patrol boat came by and instantly silenced them. The 2 men fell backwards with their machine gun.
Another tragedy was unfolding on the converted collier, River Clyde. She was deliberately beached in a cove at Cape Helles. Like the Trojan horse, the River Clyde had men hidden inside, 2,000 men. But this Trojan horse was met with heavy fire.
The enemy soldiers were so frightened that they refused to get off the huge cargo ship grounded at Ertuğrul Beach. Their commander and officers had their swords drawn, forcing the men down, but none could escape the Turkish fire.
Those following me were shot one by one, but they did not hesitate for 1 second. Captain French from the Dublin's battalion later told me that 48 men had followed me and that all of them were shot. I ordered the men to land on the shore, but it was nothing short of murder. In a very short time, the first barge was full of dead and wounded. Blood was everywhere. I never knew the smell of blood was so strong. The men in the landing boats were as helpless as those in the River Clyde. The first rower in my boat collapsed. That was the signal for the massacre to begin. Machine gun and sniper fire raining on us from the slopes found its targets. We were totally in the open and helpless, sitting ducks for the hidden Turks. In a couple of minutes, only half of the 30 men in my boat were left alive. The scene before my eyes was indescribable. The boats were lined up all the way to the shore, and they were full of dead bodies. Between the last boat in the line and the shore was like a jetty of corpses. One of my men was taking soundings. When the Turks opened fire from the slopes 330 yards away, he had reported 13 feet of depth, and I had informed those behind me. I was pulling 6 landing boats, and before I could pull any of them away, I had 2 dead and 15 wounded on my deck. When I reached the shore, I ran about 40 yards on the beach as I was loading my rifle and fixing my bayonet. There were at least 100 rifles firing at us from the slopes. The Turks could not be seen anywhere, but the noise of fire was lashing all around us like a whip. When our men advanced, they were shot, mostly by our own men. The troops who landed at Cape Helles thought that they were facing a whole division, but they weren't. They were facing just 73 men. Sergeant Yahya of Ezine and his 72 comrades, and all of them were killed. Hamilton's plan to capture Gallipoli required landings in 7 different locations in and around Sedulbahir and Arabunu. The Arabunu beach did not figure prominently in the defense plan of Liman von Sanders, the German commander of the Ottoman army. As a result, the Anzacs made it across the beach, which they called Anzac, and pushed forward towards the hills.
The hills were so high and steep, I believe that I walked at least 4 miles. We positioned ourselves under some bushes, set up our machine guns and started firing. Instantly the Turks rained fire on us, but I don't think they could see us. We exchanged fire. We killed them all. Some of them we bayoneted, some of them we shot. The others ran away.
If the Anzacs had reached the heights, they could easily have taken control of the whole of the Dardanelles. However, there was a commander who was capable of changing the course of the battle. Mustafa Kemal. As the long-awaited orders failed to come from General von Sanders, Mustafa Kemal took the initiative and ordered his division to advance towards the Kojachiman Heights. This move was decisive, both for the battle and for his country. As his division rested at the base of the key Jonkbayara hill, Mustafa Kemal started climbing it and came face to face with fleeing Turkish troops.
I said, "Why are you running away?" "Sir, the enemy." "Where?" I asked. "There," they said, showing me Hill 261. Their skirmishers were advancing quite easily, closer to me than my own men. If they approached my position, my forces would be in a very bad situation. I said to my men, "You cannot flee from the enemy." They said they had no ammunition left. I told them, "You have your bayonets," and ordered them to fix bayonets and lie prone. When they did that, the enemy did. That was the moment we won the battle.
As the 57th Regiment came up in support, Mustafa Kemal ordered his men to retake Hill 261.
"I'm not ordering you to attack, I'm ordering you to die. The time we gain before we die will enable others to replace us and stand against the enemy."
The Anzacs trapped on the slopes had only one option against a commander who ordered his men to die: withdrawal. The situation of the British at Sedulbahir was equally desperate. Confined to the beach, they faced wave after wave of Turkish counterattacks. Fresh Turkish troops seemed to spring from the very ground. On the night of the 25th, the Anzac commander, General Birdwood, contacted Hamilton and asked for permission to withdraw. Woken by his staff in the middle of the night, Hamilton decided there was only one thing to do. He sent the following note ashore. "There's nothing for it but to dig yourselves right in and stick it out. You've got through the difficult business, now you have only to dig, dig, dig until you're safe." They dug and dug. They dug trenches. There was no turning back. They followed Hamilton's orders. They dug their own graves. In the same note, Hamilton sent word that the Australian submarine AE-2 had reached the Sea of Marmara and torpedoed a gunboat. The AE-2 continued her mission for the next 5 days until she met the Sultan Hisar torpedo boat.
our 2 torpedoes missed. My last chance was to ram this self-confident giant with the indignation of an eagle. Even if we both sank, it would be a victory for us.
AE-2 had dived but was forced to resurface. When she did,
the bow of the Sultan Hisar hit the starboard beam of the enemy submarine with a noise that's hard to describe. For an experienced seaman, it was easy to see this was the submarine's last dive.
AE-2 took her place among the ships in deep history. But what about the men? The men sheltering in these cramped trenches, trying to kill and not be killed. What did this land mean for them? The trees were full of nightingales, each apparently trying to outdo the others in song. At first, the landscape was beautiful, with varied hues of green, silvery olive trees and colourful flowers. But soon it all turned to dust. Not only the view, but everything else, we turned to the colour of dust. Death was transformed into particles of dust, covering everything. The dreadful and intensive fire was deadly. After each shell, arms, legs, heads, body parts, and everything imaginable was flying around. It was a blood-curdling scene.
It was just indescribable. Uproar, dust, dirt. You couldn't hear the person next to you. You saw your comrades falling down in droves. You were faced with the fact that this was the end of everything.
It looked like the end of everything, but it was only the beginning of a long struggle. Troops who died on the 25th are lying here in piles. It's unbearable in the heat. You may ask me why none of them is buried yet. They are on the enemy side of the trenches, and anything you raise above the parapet attracts enemy fire.
We were short of ammunition and food. There were times when I envied those who fell. At least they suffered no more.
At times, the distance between the trenches was as little as 8 meters. Hand grenades thrown by one side could easily be thrown back before they exploded. The physical conditions brought the two sides into such close proximity that during lulls they could almost hear each other breathing, as if sharing their last breaths. The trenches are dug very badly. They are narrow and provide no cover. In addition, there is the terrible stink of the dead. We encircled the Turks and they encircled us. We share some trenches with the Turks. There is only a wooden barrier between us, and we throw grenades at each other over that. Both we and the Turks are digging tunnels or trenches day and night. A big Turkish attack began with an artillery barrage on the evening of the 1st of May and continued into the next day. Both this attack and an intensified one on the 19th had the same result: fields of dead and wounded. We walked from the sea up the hill through a field of tall corn filled with poppies, then another cornfield. Then the fearful smell of death began as we came upon scattered bodies. We mounted over a plateau and down through further fields of thyme, where there lay about 4,000 Turkish dead. It was indescribable. The troops began to long for a ceasefire so that the wounded could be brought in and the dead buried. On the 24th of May, a ceasefire was declared, against the commander's wishes. The guns fell silent, and the warmth of young hearts replaced the savagery of war. Turkish and Anzac soldiers worked together, digging pits to bury the dead. They started to communicate by sign language and offered each other cigarettes, exchanging small items as mementos. For the first time, the Anzacs saw that the Turks were not the wild beasts they'd been made out to be.
I realised that I did not harbour any feelings of enmity towards the Turk. Not only myself, but none of us. He was no longer Abdul, but Johnny Turk. He became our fellow sufferer. I approached the Turks and offered one some beef jerky. He smiled and appeared to be very pleased. He offered me some dry figs on a string. They fought clean and were the bravest men on earth.
They no longer saw each other as enemies, but as fellow men who shared the same destiny, shedding their sweat and blood on the same soil. But the war was summoning them back to their trenches. When they parted, the Anzacs called to the Turks, "Farewell, my friend," while the Turks replied to them, "Goodbye and come back again." And the war continued from where it had left off. The Turks called the battleship Goliath, raining death upon them over Morto Bay, the Old Hag. The Turkish destroyer, Muavinet Emilie, slipping stealthily down the straits, would send the Old Hag into the depths of history. The naval war went on both in the Straits and in the Sea of Marmara. The French submarines, Jules, Mariotte and Saphir, were all sunk by mines as they attempted to make it through the Straits. The Turquoise, entangled in an anti-submarine net and under intensive fire from the shore, was captured and renamed Mustachip Onbash in honor of the sharpshooting Turkish corporal who forced her surrender. On the 25th of May, the gods of war started a new game in Gallipoli. The German submarine, U-21, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Otto Hersing, arrived off Kapatepe, or Anzac. At exactly 12 o'clock, I saw a slow-moving battleship north of the entrance to the Straits. It was the Triumph. When the U-21 detected the Triumph, it was during the lunch break after the bombardment of the Turkish trenches. The crew had received their rations and were sunbathing on the deck. I waited for an opportune time to attack. I saw through my periscope that we had closed to within 400 meters of the battleship. I located the target in my sights and fired the torpedo from 300 meters. Its explosion jolted both ourselves and the sea.
I saw the mast of the battleship tilting about 30 degrees. The Triumph quickly heeled over. Then she capsized and her keel was up. Within 10 minutes, she had made a somersault like a dolphin and disappeared.
Disappearing amidst the jubilation of the Turks, the Triumph took with her the hopes of the Anzacs waiting on the shore. The presence of the U-21 was a major threat for the whole Allied fleet. De Robeck put his ships under security at Imbros Island. To try to maintain the troops' morale, the aging Majestic was sent back into the Inferno. But the ship's company was sure that this would be her final mission. So sure that the officers allowed all the champagne on board to be consumed that night. With great skill, the German submarine singled out the Majestic among the many fully laden cargo ships, as if choosing the most beautiful concubine from the Sultan's harem. It was terrific. The whole ship seemed to lift. There was a tremendous shock. A column of water, bits of spars, net shelf, etc., went high up in the air. The ship immediately began listing to port. The Majestic remained at such an angle that it was impossible to stand upright on deck.
The waters around her were full of men. Some were swimming to nearby ships. Others were having difficulty even remaining afloat. While sailors were dying in the water, soldiers were dying from the lack of it. The one word on all the parched lips in the heat of that summer was water.
I closed the eyes of some young lads for the last time. Germans, Australians, the British we collected from the front line, and our own wounded. Often they mumbled a single word in their own language. Mother. We put water into their mouths, drop by drop. That was another word they kept saying. Water.
We would dig a hole in the trenches and wait for water to collect in it. We would boil that water, but its colour would still be like milk and it would still taste like sandpaper. Although tea would somewhat change its flavour, the men could tell by the taste whether it was a Turkish or a British soldier buried close to it. Later, a ship able to desalinate seawater arrived. Today, she lies deep in that same seawater. This desalinated seawater was always lukewarm, rather greasy and salty. Imagine drinking this when you're frying under the sun. When there was a rumour that the sea was red with blood, the men were not very keen to drink that water either. I recall that the colour of the tea we made was quite dark, and that was not very appetising. Desalinated water was brought ashore in tins. There, it was kept in a water tank that had been brought from Egypt. The men in the trenches had to fill their flasks from this water tank. In contrast, the Turks had many natural sources of water. They did not have much of a water problem. Their problem was hunger.
We're pressing our fists on our rumbling stomachs. The enemy shows us all kinds of food from their trenches. We can hardly contain ourselves not to fix our bayonets and kill them to take their food. I'm not afraid of death if it wasn't for this stink and hunger.
There was one other thing as important as a sip of water or a piece of bread in the lives of the soldiers: letters from home. These brought happy memories, hopes for the future, love, a mother's caress, a father's care to the front line. Parcels, what a wonderful word, a word associated with the best times at the front. No one who hasn't lived through really difficult times can appreciate the joy of opening a parcel or of thinking about it. For the troops in the front line, the sinking of a steamboat carrying letters from their faraway homes and families was as much of a blow as the loss of a ship carrying drinking water. From time to time, the parcels were open and most of their contents stolen. It's easy to imagine the anger of a man who'd been waiting weeks for that parcel from home. Though the two sides had different problems, they also had some common ones: lice, dysentery, and clouds of blowflies. We squashed the lice. They sneaked into the seams of our pants. We'd remove our pants, sit there completely naked, and burn the lice with a burning piece of wood. Sometimes we would burn ourselves as well, but it was impossible to free ourselves from lice. Gradually, we got used to them. Luckily, there were lots of ants about, and we later found that lice kept away from ants. We got excellent results when we left our shirts on top of an ant's nest, but we had to examine the shirts carefully. The bite of an angry ant is much worse than that of a louse. Flies were all around one's mouth, wounds and boils. They truly were a curse. A shared fate, shared suffering, and shared death. Both sides yearned for a return to humanity.
We were singing folk songs in an effort to blot out the situation we were in. We could hear the enemy singing too. At times like this, we'd throw things to each other. They'd throw us things like cigarettes and chocolate, and we'd throw them fruit and stuff, as if there was no battle going on, but we were playing neighbors.
There had to be a way out of Gallipoli, and Hamilton believed that he'd found it. We're now approaching the long-awaited day. We should have attained some of our goals, but despite the unfavorable conditions, we still have time to implement our plans. Everything was set for the last act of the Gallipoli tragedy. On the 6th of August, British and Anzac troops began an all-out offensive, and the next day, 20,000 British troops landed at Suvla Bay. The aim of the offensive was at last to capture the Kojachi-Mentepe range, key to the Gallipoli Peninsula. But again, things went wrong on the beaches. Instead of pushing on, the fresh British troops dug in. There was no one but the enemy in front of us, and we did not know where they were or how many. However, as we knew we'd be under fire in the morning, we had to try to dig trenches. When it did attack at dawn, the new army paid a heavy price for its delay. As they withdrew, the Turks very skillfully hid snipers in all sorts of places. The impact of these snipers can be gauged by the heavy casualties we've suffered as we advance. We've already lost most of our officers. But they had to keep moving. There was no turning back. Victory lay ahead.
The British were cunning. Their soldiers had tin plates on their backs, which they put up in front of the trenches they'd just taken. This was to make sure their artillery wouldn't shell that trench. When we noticed this, we took plates off dead enemy soldiers and put them up in front of our trenches. This beat them at their own game. It became quite a joke among our men.
The British cunning had backfired. The gods of war would not tolerate the deadly mistake they'd made of spending the first day at Suvla resting. At this time, there was only a gendarmerie battalion of 1,500 men at Suvla. Had the British pushed forward on August the 7th, they would have advanced quite easily, crushing small units on their way, and they would have won the battle. On the 8th of August, General von Sanders visited the front and made up his mind.
The battle was to be coordinated by a single capable commander, Mustafa Kemal, and Kemal decided that attack was the best form of defense. On the 9th of August, he launched a surprise counterattack and caught the Anzacs unawares. The Turks attacked that afternoon 5 times. If not for the 3 machine guns we brought up laboriously from 1,000 feet below, our situation would have been very grave. We couldn't stop the Turkish counterattack. Trench warfare resumed. Both sides dug underground tunnels with the aim of dynamiting the enemy trenches. Both sides suffered more heavy casualties. By October, the British cabinet was considering evacuation, a prospect Hamilton considered unthinkable. On the 16th of October, Hamilton was relieved of his command. He was replaced by General Sir Charles Monro, who reported, "The troops, with the exception of the Anzacs, are not equal to a sustained effort. We merely hold the fringe of the shores and we are confronted by the Turks in very formidable entrenchments on which only a frontal attack is possible. I recommend a withdrawal from the peninsula." Lord Kitchener, the British Secretary of State for War, arrived in person in November. What he saw confirmed Monro's report. But now winter was drawing in, and the unfortunate troops paid the price for the delay in reaching a decision. In the morning light, the top of the hill was aglow with ice. It was impossible to walk on it. Our overcoats were frozen stiff. Trying to fold them was like trying to fold wood. Our water carts were frozen, and the limited amount we had was used in the kitchen and in treating the wounded. Our hands and faces were swollen, dark, and cracked. On the 7th of December, the decision to withdraw was finally made. Preparations got underway in strict secrecy. If the Turks had learned of the plan, they could have turned the withdrawal into a rout. During the day, boats kept bringing troops and equipment to shore, but at night they ferried others out. This time, in contrast to the landings, nothing was left to chance.
We'd go back to the trenches and reload our rifles. We'd lean them on the sandbags and tie tin cans to the trigger, with sand trickling into them. When they got heavy enough, they'd fall and pull the trigger.
On Christmas Day, we threw a can of meat to the other side in order to have some fun. The can came back 3 or 4 days later. They put a stone and a piece of paper inside it. It read, in good English, "We are sorry you are leaving. See you at Suez." They knew we were going. On the 20th of December, 1915, the last troops left Suvla Bay and Anzac. Cape Helles was evacuated on the 9th of January. The last troops to go destroyed the weaponry and supplies they were leaving behind. Our task was to destroy everything. We put it all in a pile, bags of sugar, boxes of tea. On them we piled paraffin and citric acid. We even put ham on the very top and pierced holes in the meat cans to make them go off. Tons of ammunition and supplies were still left behind. And of course, the bodies of tens of thousands of young men. We had no fond memories of Sedul Bahir. No one wanted to see that place again. But what about the men we'd left behind? Those friends in arms who came happily with us to fight, who fought so bravely alongside us, who will lie forever between the bare rocks where they fell. No one regretted leaving Gallipoli, but there were very few who could really rejoice. I found out what war is all about, with all the blood, death, and destruction it brings. Hearing the cries of the wounded, of those young men who were marching bravely and full of life only that morning, seeing their motionless bodies frozen in strange attitudes, remains a nightmare that I will remember until the end of my life. What remains of this bloody tragedy are the lifeless young bodies, some personal belongings, and those who bear the marks of war not only in their bodies, but in their souls as well. They remember Gallipoli, not as enemies, but as the joint creators of legendary heroism with great pride and sadness until the end of their lives.
I did my knee at work a few weeks back, and the doc says that I'll be off the road for 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. I mean, sure, I can't drive, but I reckon there's other stuff that I could be doing. And the doc thinks so too. I've got 2 good hands, and I know the place inside out. But instead, here I am doing nothing. It's not like I'm helpless.
Every employer in Victoria will soon receive one of these return to work packs. Read yours and keep it handy, because helping injured workers get back to work helps everyone.
That's the worst part. I could be doing something.
Today's weather report for the house. The Bureau has issued a sheep weather alert for the entire house. This is due to a cold front, which is expected to cross the doorstep in the morning. There will be a cloud of dust in the kitchen and gales of laughter coming from the lounge room. Cold stares will be experienced along the hallway, followed by torrents of abuse and storming out of the house, as a depression centers itself over the couch. The frump should weaken by late afternoon. Fine and funny conditions should then prevail, with the chance of an occasional small discharge of wind.
We turn our backs for a few months.
Join Richard Ackland,
What happens?
Narelle Hooper,
The Business Show has discovered a loophole.
and Raina Sarampayat.
Publishing and broadcasting is doing nicely.
The most experienced team of business reporters on Australian television.
So there'll be rich pickings for local and global issues to keep us riveted for the rest of the year.
I think probably wearing a tie is an excellent idea.
Clear race 5, packing them.
David, can you keep the noise down out there, please? I'm giving investment advice.
The Business Show returns Sunday at 6.
Class is individual. Class is about what makes you feel good.
Tuesday, taking a bit more class.
There are all kinds of signs to point out to the world where you stand.
We're fortunate that we've had people like Kerry Packer come into the game and given it a high profile. And
Where you went to school.
I myself wouldn't have been able to attend had I not received a scholarship.
What kind of degree you got.
I know there are a lot of people that have the Gold Star service who would love to be out there with a pie. I also know people having the pie would love to have the opportunity to eat the Gold Star.
It all comes down to class. 7:30 Tuesday. 2002, Korea, Japan. You will see every game. You will get analysis by experts. The biggest sporting event in the world, treated with the respect it deserves. The World Cup, 48 games and more on SBS.
On the movie show, the young and the brave in We Were Soldiers.
You men have done a hell of a job today. They won't get through us, sir. You can count on it.
Love, infidelity and a fear of commitment in The Last Kiss. The Academy Award-winning story of being stuck in the middle in No Man's Land.
Tell them that as usual, neither side can agree.
On the movie show, Wednesday night at 8.
This is the story of Queen Victoria's empire.
She was the longest reigning monarch in British history, and her empire the largest ever known. The marvellous four-part series tracing the pride and power of Queen Victoria's empire is now available on video from Deluxe, selected video stores, online here at SBS, or by telephoning 1300 305 999 for mail order.
And frankly, your initiatives are becoming a problem. Did I ask?
Telstra Call Waiting lets important calls through even when your phone's busy.
Excuse me, Mr. Boswell, I've got another call.
Just press recall 2 to switch between callers.
Hello?
Jude, it's Alan. Congratulations, you've got the job.
Mr. Boswell, you know that filing you wanted me to do on my day off? I just finished.
Call Waiting. Just press recall 2. It's free.
McDonald's Taste Menu now brings you the tantalising flavours of India.
Try a tandoori chicken burger, marinated chicken and crispy lettuce with a sauce of mint and the taste of yogurt, all on toasted naan bread.
Or go for McDonald's new vegetable curry puffs with just the right amount of spice.
So get the taste of the world.
Right here in Australia with McDonald's new Taste Menu.
Things that make you go, mmm.
SBS Television.
September the 15th, 1944. In enemy waters, the crews of 2 United States submarines are in a desperate race against time to rescue hundreds of men barely alive.
They were in terrible shape. You know, great big men weighed probably 90 pounds, nothing but skin and bone.
The submarines had returned to the location of a devastating attack on a Japanese convoy. What they didn't know was that the convoy had been transporting Australian and British prisoners of war who had by now been in the water for 4 days.
First, I guess we were in denial. The Brits and the Aussies were our friends and allies, and good God, what have we done here?
Crew members on each of the submarines filmed these haunting images. Over 2,000 men had gone into the water. That day, only 127 would be saved.
I never expected half of them that I took down that hatch to survive anyway.
Now 2 of those who did have returned to reveal their story for the first time. Ray Wheeler from Melbourne, Australia, and Wilf Barnett from Blackpool in England have traveled to Thailand, which is where their remarkable story begins. This is the first time they've met, although they share a common bond, experiences that have scarred their lives.
You went straight into Burma, did you? You straight into Burma.
In 1942, as half-starved prisoners of war, they'd been forced to build this same railway, enduring a slave-like existence and ceaseless brutality, which was to claim the lives of many of their friends. They'd been working at opposite ends of the line, and back then would cross only once its most infamous symbol, the bridge over the River Kwai.
They're definitely new sleepers on there. And the old original sleepers, I remember them, weren't anywhere near as big as that.
These are old sleepers there.
Yeah.
Look at this one.
Yeah, it's had a fair life.
Yeah.
Wilf Barnett had been serving with the Royal Artillery when he was taken prisoner. Ray Wheeler had been attached to a unit of engineers. Both had been captured with the fall of Singapore.
I know what today is. Today's your 78th birthday, isn't it?
Cheers.
And here's the best to you.
Yeah.
I bet you never believed you'd be sitting here having a sip of
my
the old,
21st.
of the old grog.
We had a snake, a Thai called a snake. He took the skin and he gave us a snake. And it took us 2 days to cook it for my birthday. That was their 21st birthday, you know. The snake was a bit tough. The Japs couldn't believe what we could eat snake, you know, but it's different now. I mean, that would have been nice if we'd have had that, you know.
But you'd still eat snake if it was put in front of you now, wouldn't you?
Probably. It might be a bit tough. The Japanese obviously said they had the food coming up to us, but the only thing that they really gave us was the rice. There was nothing else. There was no vegetables, you know. Because I was so young, I always go into the hut and I helped 2 guys, and I'll never forget that. In the morning, before I went out to the camp working, I used to wash the sacks for them. When I came back at night, I'll never forget it, 2 of the guys was bent up. The knees were bent.
They'd gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened a lot.
And I bent, we had to break the legs, you know.
To straighten them out.
To bury them.
Yeah.
It's getting through to me now, this.
But that happened a lot.
Yeah.
Just 14 months after full construction had begun, the railway was completed. The prisoners were told that 900 of the fittest men in the British and Australian camps were to be sent to work in Japan.
It was a lottery whether you got picked or not. I know that some of the chaps were picked were a damn sight fitter than I was, and a hell of a lot were picked were worse off than I was. But it was a pretty cross-section of the chaps that had come down with me out of the jungle.
The point was it was important that we was going away from the jungle, getting away from the camp. We wasn't working, but going to Japan was what we thought was going to be a good thing, you know. And the lads was quite happy about it.
This was the ship that was to take them to Japan. Over 1,300 British and Australian prisoners were crammed on board the Rikoyo Maru, most confined to the hold. A further 900 were to sail on a similar vessel. The ships bore no markings to show that they had POWs on board. There were mixed emotions on the quayside.
The Jap seaman had already told us that I think there was 10 out of 11 ships was sunk. Only 1 out of 11 ships was the average getting through, so we weren't very optimistic about it.
The only fear was if we did get torpedoed, was the sharks and things like that.
We had a sense that we'd reached rock bottom, and nothing could be any worse. It couldn't get worse, it had to get better.
The convoy of 9 ships began the crossing on September the 6th, 1944. 5 days later, 3 frigates and 3 empty freighters joined from the Philippines. Waiting ahead, a wolf pack of U.S. Navy submarines, including the USS Pampanito and the USS Sea Lion II.
It's a high-risk game, and you ride one of these babies and you'll find out what high risk is. I was electrician's mate and controllerman, and that's in the maneuvering room, the next compartment up, and that's the complete propulsion of the vessel. Submarines are different. You live together and you die together, believe me.
We were all very young. I was a communications officer. That involved radio transmissions to and from our headquarters, and a lot of coding and decoding. My battle station job was the torpedo data computer. We took the information from the periscope that the captain would give us, and we put all that in this computer, and it would crank out a solution. And that solution then was fed to the torpedoes.
Morale was usually high. We all had faith in one another because on a submarine, it's very close and one man can make a mistake and sink the whole bunch. I enjoyed being a torpedoman. Most torpedomen loved to be a torpedoman because it was getting the big stuff out of the tube, and if there was going to be any fighting, that was the vanguard of it.
We didn't know how long it would take us to go to Japan. We knew the odds of being sunk were pretty high. We all hung on to the hope that if we did get sunk, somehow or other we'd get away and get home.
At night time, you didn't hear nothing, only the movement of the ship, the creaking of the ship. The corvettes and the destroyers was circling around all the time, in case we were in an attack.
We knew something hot was going to come off. We knew that there was going to be a convoy coming out of Singapore.
Pull them back, throw them up. This is the speed of the whole thing. They all light up real nice when you're underway.
I lost a cousin at Pearl Harbor. I was mad at the Japanese, furious, and I couldn't wait to get out. And that attitude was typical.
On the sea line, you could hear the whole show going on that they would be calling back, well, the range has changed, the range has not changed, the range is 2,000, get the angle on the bow.
Our radar scope showed several ships, and we just went in and shot the first ones we came to.
The Rikoyo Maru was targeted.
When the torpedoes go off in the spread, then you start counting. Everything is silent in the room. You can almost feel the pulse of the other torpedomen that are in the back of the room.
Somebody shouted torpedoes, and we looked over the side in the wake of the two torpedoes coming towards us, and we thought, well, that's it, we've had it.
It wasn't a bang, it was a boom, you know, and that's about the way it was sound, boom, and you feel the shock waves of it.
Japs were yelling, our chaps were yelling, and it was obvious there was another one coming, and then that hit.
Hundreds of men leapt for their lives into the water. Many had life jackets. Others were clinging to anything that would float. Hours later, the USS Pampanito would strike.
We fired 6 fish forward, and one hung up in the tubes, which we call a hot run, and is very dangerous because it can blow up at any time. Then we made a turn around and we dropped these 4. We got 7 out of 9 hits. And we left on the surface doing the whole goddamn sky lit up. They were throwing everything, the Japs were.
The Pampanito had torpedoed the second ship carrying Allied prisoners. Eventually, the Japanese would rescue over 600 survivors from the 2 ships. But there were still 1,500 men unaccounted for, most from the Rikoyo Maru.
Well, the only thing that I can say about it is bloody humid like it was in that bloody ship.
Oh, but it's a beautiful place. Beautiful place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wilf and Ray have arrived on Tiamat an island they sailed past half a century ago. They've come here to relive the most harrowing part of their battle for survival, events that would be too painful to recall for many years. Much of what they witnessed while adrift without food or water continues to haunt them.
There was a sense, a strange sense, that for the first time for that nearly 3 years you were a free man. There was enough of us there to be our own boss, and the Japs could do nothing about it, and we felt free. And if anyone felt threatened, there's a few chaps particularly, I can remember 2 of them particularly, who would swim anywhere to push a Jap under, the 2 of them in concert. And I don't know how many they killed, but both of them drowned from there, couldn't get back to the main bunch.
Japs would then drop in depth charges, which was hitting your stomach, and your stomach was coming up. It was a very horrible sensation. And then one destroyer went straight through the lads, killing some of them.
A boat came through looking for Japanese amongst us, and of course there was none left by that time. The Jap officer in the bows had pointed what looked like a Luger pistol at us and was just saying, "Goodbye, you all die, goodbye, you all die." That was the message we got from him. We tied everything that was float together, Carley floats, hatch covers, even oil drums, and you took a turn out of the water sitting up. You weren't completely out of the water because the waves just lapped over.
The funny thing about the Brits, they all started singing, "They'll always be in England and rule Britannia." Temptation to drink the sea was unbearable. It had to happen, eventually it happened, because these guys were so desperate for water, they decided we tried to stop them. But as soon as they started drinking that salt water, that was it. They had to go. They were going to die.
We saw sharks once, I think about the second day, and there was one Japanese seaman we could only construe. He was off one of the oil tankers, laying on a bit of wood, or tied onto a bit of wood, badly burnt. He was all quite a ways from us, well enough to recognise who he was. And we'd seen a few fins of sharks come in near us and just slapped the water and they disappeared. But next thing there was a flurry in the water over there and a bit of blood. The bit of wood had turned over and he was gone.
Drinking the Japs' blood, what we killed, that's what we tried to do. The guy we had on this raft, they cut him up and tried to drink his blood. But again, it's not very nice. But it wets your lips. I think the worst period for me was listening to these guys screaming out at night in terror. This happened every night. They'd be shouting, "Help me, help me." That's my worst nightmare.
The first ones that died, they got a proper funeral service. But when it came down to the numbers were diminishing, it was desperate, everyone was losing strength. Whoever was nearest would possibly just close his eyes and push them off.
I think there must have been 20 of us together. And as time went on, as they died, we just pushed them off and put another one on. And that's how it carried on. And when we finished, there was 3 of us left. My mate went. And all he said to me was, "Barney, I'm sorry. Tell me, Dad, I'm sorry." I don't think we could have lasted much longer.
On September the 15th, the USS Pampanito returned to the scene of the convoy attack to survey wreckage. What happened next was filmed by one of the crew, electrician's mate Paul Pappas, who died in 1997, and also by Joe Bates aboard the Sea Lion, which was called to the area.
I was the ship's photographer, and this was an unusual event. None of us had ever participated in anything like this, so I thought it was worth photography, and I just began shooting. I haven't thought about this in a long time. It brings back a lot of memories. They were a mess. I've never seen human beings who looked so woeful as they did. I would guess about half of them couldn't see.
We would just pull them up from the bow planes, but if they couldn't get to them, one or the other of us would swim out and bring them in.
It was so pathetic. What mankind can do to mankind, that was just horrible. These poor guys, my heart just went out to them, all covered with oil. And yet, their dauber was up, and you know, you sink us one day and you come back and pick us up, you bloody bloke. So somebody shot that.
As they were passing them up to us on deck, we were wiping them off with mineral spirits. And when we ran out of mineral spirits, we actually used hydraulic oil. But it got rid of that thick, heavy 6 oil that they had all over them.
My job at that time was lowering them down the hatch to the next guy. Some of them, their flesh would actually start peeling off. I never expected half of them that I took down that hatch to survive anyway.
After rescuing everyone in sight, the submarine Pampanita, with 73 survivors on board, headed at full speed for the recently captured island of Saipan, where American doctors were waiting. However, the crew of the Sea Lion, which had been operating a search 10 miles to the northeast, were still busy hauling men out of the water, including Wilf Barnett.
I tried to swim to the sub, and they shouted, "No, get back on the raft." And it was unbelievable, the sensation to know that we were going to be saved. Because by then, our tongues, we couldn't talk. We were trying to shout to these guys, we were waving and doing everything we could. And to think that, all right, in Japanese, if they'd have picked it up, it wouldn't have made a difference. We'd have been happy.
We were lying dead in the water, and that's a terrible thing for a submarine to do, because you're just totally vulnerable. The skipper, he had a terrible decision to make. He just said, that's all. I can still hear one guy yelling at us, over here, over here, over here, wanting us to come over there and pick him up. He could see, apparently, that there was a rescue underway, and of course he wanted to be rescued, and we didn't. We left the poor guy, and I'm sure he died.
I tell you, it hurt me very much. I never really knew why we left, you know? I never knew why the decision was made to leave. I was no authority to say it to the bridge, but we got more room, you know? We got more room, and that's the way I felt.
I don't know that we could have done a lot more anyway, you know? We're limited to how many people we can take on board. There were so many of them out there, they'd need a big ship to take everybody on board. There was, what, 1,300 or something like that, they said, in the water.
I felt pretty bad that we couldn't have gotten there earlier. It just made me sad that we couldn't have brought all of them back home, you know. So.
Ray Wheeler was one of those left behind.
We were against the skyline and we could see them quite clearly. Bill Smith, the big tall man, he'd secured an oar and he tied his shirt to it, and he was sitting on the Carly float waving that oar and singing out over here, and we were saying, they'll never hear, and it was obvious they couldn't hear us. And when they motored off, you heard the motors start, and they went off and just disappeared. He said, he threw the oar in the water and he said, if there's a God in heaven, he didn't hear my prayers.
On Ray Wheeler's fourth night adrift, the weather closed in.
Come dark, the waves got bigger and bigger, and we realised we were in for a mighty blow of some sort. We didn't know that was a typhoon that we were part of. We were in 30, 40-foot waves. You'd be down the bottom at one second, and the next thing you'd just, this surge, you'd come up with a surge to the top, but you'd only be there about a brief second and down you'd go again. This went on all night.
The USS Queenfish and USS Barb had steamed 450 miles to resume the search.
That fifth day was a bit disappointing that we never saw anyone, and come the sixth morning, the Barb and the Queenfish that had been called up by the first two, and they'd come down looking for us. And we learnt later on that they'd seen us early in the morning, and they said that we were a pretty active bunch and we'd be all right for the time being, and they decided to search for the worst off blokes first and pick us up last, which they eventually did. They surfaced alongside us it was getting on towards dusk, and just this massive roaring of the ballast coming out of their tanks and bubbling water, and there it was, not far, 200 feet away. Freddie Pearson yelled out of the frying pan into the fire, they're bloody Jerrys. And next thing a voice, a real Yank voice, hi, can any of you guys catch? And bang, a line comes snaking over, fired out of a gun, which we caught, tied it to the raft and was pulled into the side. And they didn't have to get in the water, we all had enough to clamber aboard and help each other to get aboard the submarine.
Together, the four submarines had picked up 159 men. On the Pampanito and the Sea Lion, film was also taken below decks during the 4-day journey to Saipan. Rescuing the men was one thing, keeping them alive was another. Roy Williams, the pharmacist mate on the Sea Lion, was caring for over 50 men.
Back in my training somewhere, I knew that we couldn't feed them too fast. We had to take it real slow on food, and so that was the hardest part, to give them just a little soup each day and a little water. It was tough when those people, they were starving.
I see one guy come down the forward battery hatch, and he came down under his own power pretty well, and we had some chow out on the table, and they just opened a can of butter, and if you've ever seen canned U.S. Navy butter, it's a real sight, because it was all completely green, and you have to, and he took one look at that and just whoomp. But they were in very, very, very tough shape, rough shape, and the only thing I could say is anything and everything that could have been done for him on this boat was done for him by the crew, the officers, the pharmacist mate, everybody.
Even the second day, you could see a change in their overall mental attitude. They could see and they could ask questions, and they would ask about solid food, and we said, well, we're going to be in Saipan soon, and where we'll have a team of real doctors look you over and determine whether you can have solid food or not. In my own mind, we helped them, but they did it themselves. The determination was still there.
One guy, I remember, apparently didn't have a life jacket, and he was treading water. And we got him in a bunk, and he's still treading water. And he wouldn't stop, and Doc worked with him and tried to talk to him and get him to understand that he didn't have to tread water anymore. And The poor guy, he finally apparently heard Doc, and he stopped treading water, and he died almost at that moment. He was the first one that we buried at sea.
The 4 we lost on the way in were just too far gone. And the last fellow that I worked on, I did try to save him with blood plasma, but his veins had deteriorated to the point they wouldn't hold a needle.
We sewed him up in a mattress cover and put a 4-inch shell in there so they would definitely go to the bottom. And the captain read the Burial at Sea service from the Bible, and we slipped him off the side. When we got close to Saipan, somebody there decided to send a doctor out in a destroyer. And they transferred this doctor aboard. Unfortunately, he wasn't much help. The guy was drunk when he came aboard, I think. And he walked through and looked at these fellas and patted them and turned it back to Doc Williams. That was an unworthy moment. I felt ashamed that the Navy would send out such a man.
You'd be surprised what 4 days did for him. You know, new clothing, food, and getting cleaned. They were a different bunch of men when they got off in Saipan.
Of course, those are all survivors there eating the ice cream, mugging the camera. We'd done what we could, and now it was up to the people at the hospital to get them all back on their feet. There they go.
When we landed in Saipan, we was getting pretty strong then. And they took us to this camp. We're in tents up on the mountains there, and we slept on the bed for a while. Then we couldn't get used to sleeping on a bed, so we slept on the floor.
The ground rocked for the first 3 days. It was just the sensation of being out of water after so long. But apart from that, we were tended to by American nurses, and we hadn't had anything to do with white girls for that many years. It was just as if you were in God's hands. It was beautiful. There were some lovely girls amongst them.
After all that they'd endured, the survivors finally were to sail home, the British via Pearl Harbor and the United States. Many would receive a hero's welcome. While recovering, the men had been providing intelligence officers with a wealth of information, including the location of airfields and ammunition dumps, defensive positions, and the sites of POW camps. Weeks later, newspapers around the world would reveal for the first time the horrors of the Death Railway and of the convoy attack and dramatic rescue. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, wanted to personally greet the survivors. He insisted that if the U.S. Navy had known that prisoners were being transported, the convoy would not have been attacked.
He gave us a lovely speech and said, shook hands with it all and said, brilliant, wonderful. And he said, we'll get these bastards, these Japs. Don't worry, we'll beat them.
The British survivors spent 4 days relaxing in Hawaii. They were invited to cocktail parties and on sightseeing tours. However, guards accompanied them everywhere, and they were ordered not to talk about their experiences in captivity. "54 years after their dramatic rescue, Wilf and Ray have arrived in Albuquerque, New Mexico to meet the men they owe their lives to at a special reunion.
This has been the one and only time possibly I'll meet any of the submariners that were involved in those days, and we were involved with. It means a heck of a lot to me.
Well, when you meet these guys, they'll really make you welcome.
Yep.
As I said, I met them in Norfolk, Virginia, and it was unbelievable, as though we was buddies for life, you know.
Each year, veterans of the Pacific Campaign gather from across America to remember old times and lost friends.
From one of the survivors about how...
Barney! How you doing? Hey, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, pal.
Remember the doc? Hey, Doc.
Oh, I talked to Barney.
Never forgot you. Yeah. We never forgot you guys.
I know.
Yeah. Man, it's lovely to meet you. You're the finest thing that happened.
Introduce myself. I'm a mate of Wolf's. Let's see, Queenfish picked me up.
Oh, Queenfish. Ah, yeah.
Good luck
Wonderful.
to you. That's probably you right out there.
And that, you say that is me?
I think so. I think so. And
Fantastic.
Here they are. See, dragging them aboard.
Right.
We were also on the gudgeon when we picked up 29 Australians. I think it was 29, wasn't it?
Yeah.
29 Australians from the island of Timor that were fighting rear guard action.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, no, I had a lot of friends in Melbourne. I could just see them.
What a change. What a change, Joe.
Well, boys to old men.
Yeah. Memories. Good and bad, right?
Heroism knows neither rank nor rating aboard a submarine. And what is heroism? That's like asking, what is honor? And who are America's true heroes? Let me tell you who they are. They're people. Ordinary people. People who, when called upon, are willing to fight, and if need be, die for a way of life or a cause in a country they believe in.
Sherman said war is hell, and it is.
Shark 1, 58 men lost. Ptolemy, 79 men lost. Agrarian, 70 members lost. The Argonaut, 105 men lost.
Bravely they died. In proud remembrance, we salute them.
San Francisco, the final leg of Ray and Wilf's journey. A city with a permanent reminder of the crossing.
I can't believe I'm here, actually. You know, it's just a shock to the system.
Yeah, it's a little bit emotional.
Jesus.
Oh, my God, look at that.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Fantastic. My God, that makes memories.
Well, that was our future a long time ago.
Yeah. It's very emotional. Keep thinking about the lad what was buried at sea.
Yep.
Sorry, Dave, it's getting through to me, this.
That's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Pan Bonito.
But it's still the same with the sea line.
After that fateful crossing, the USS Pampanito went on to make 3 further war patrols before being retired from active service. Later, she served as a training ship. In 1986, the submarine was declared a National Historic Landmark and has been fully restored to her World War II appearance.
Oh boy, this brings back memories, Bernie.
You're not kidding.
Eh?
Yeah, it's... Yeah.
There's me bunk.
Like that.
Yeah, that's my bunk.
That's your bunk, is it?
Yeah.
Good.
I'll have a look at these.
I know, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the tubes.
4 tubes, 4 out.
Yeah. Imagine that, it's in the ship.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But look at that.
Yeah.
Betty.
Oh, yeah.
I remember her.
Yeah, legs 11,
Yeah.
we used to call her.
Yeah.
She was great.
The lady with the golden legs.
Yeah.
And I was sitting down here and talking to the crew. So, still so weak that as I said, I don't know what you had to eat, but I think mostly us, we was having ice cream. I can't remember the rest of the stuff we had.
They were pretty good to us.
That's right.
The pharmacist mate on that, he just let us eat what we wanted to, and he said, you feel free to go down the galley. He said, and just ask them if they got it, they'll give it to you. And they were apologising because they'd just run out of fresh milk. You look at it now in retrospect, how does such a small galley cope with 73 blokes each day, and they've all got their 3 square minutes, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
This takes you back to when we were just skinny little buggers that they picked up and carried around like dolls.
Yeah, but these fellas on here, some were so ill, they never thought they'd make it, you know?
I hadn't thought of those blokes now for several years, and this has brought it all back again.
Yeah. They were saying so many things to us. All I can remember is, you're all right, you're safe now, and we look after you. And there was tears. There was really a lot of tears, because they know that they torpedoed us and then picked it up. And to see us alive, and, you know, after all, we was like little dolls to them, you know, the big guys. I can feel it, as though I was on it yesterday.
Well, Barney, that's the end of a long journey for us this time, but what it's brought back to me is all those blokes, you know, 1,100 never come home.
I know.
1,100 families were bereaved. We had to take that message back and sort all the files out and let those people know that. I don't know how we even survived that.
No, neither do I.
Yeah.
After being all 11 years in the prison camps, the way they treated us.
There was nothing worse than getting a knock on the door at night and the wife of someone you'd met before you went away that you knew was dead and he died on that boat come in. Is it true? Is it true? But they didn't have to ask because they knew by the look on your face that it was true.
The crossing had claimed the lives of 1,400 men, but it wasn't the only such tragedy. As the war was ending, the Japanese destroyed documents relating to the number of ships and prisoners lost at sea due to friendly fire. The figure could be as high as more than 20,000, nearly 1 in 3 of those who sailed.
over 20 years, SBS has brought Australians unparalleled coverage of the World Game. This year, one network will again ensure you won't miss any World Cup matches. 2002 Korea-Japan, from the home of the World Game, SBS.
This is the story of the rise and fall of Egypt's Golden Empire.
Sunday night, a new series celebrating the most wondrous pharaohs in the Egyptian New Kingdom, Ramesses the Great, Tutankhamen and Nefertiti.
It is a story brought to life by their own words and those of the ordinary men and women who would change the course of history. In eyewitness accounts, soldiers describe the birth of an empire forged on the battlefield. Pharaohs record how they created their own legends and became the richest rulers in the world.
Egypt's Golden Empire premieres Sunday at 7:30.
On the movie show, the young and the brave in We Were Soldiers.
You men have done a hell of a job today.
They won't get through us, sir. You can count on it.
Love, infidelity and a fear of commitment in The Last Kiss. The Academy Award-winning story of being stuck in the middle in no man's land.
Tell them that as usual, neither side can agree.
On the movie show, Wednesday night at 8.
We've travelled 4 million kilometres, visited 160 countries and learned about the hopes and aspirations of the many diverse and interesting residents in our global village. Global Village, 6 p.m. weeknights. Your world is an amazing place.
Also 1954 hatte mein Vater sich vorgenommen, die amerikanischen Kontinente von Nord bis Süd zu durchqueren. In Peru hat er dieses großes Gruppenprojekt von der Magnum, dieses Generation Children, hat er einen Auftrag, einen Hirtenjungen aufzunehmen. Dann ist er nach Cusco gefahren und hat in Cusco vor allem so das Dorfleben studiert, die Strukturen, die Leute. Man hat auch sehr viel gezeichnet. Das Foto wurde aufgenommen auf der Straße zwischen Cusco und Pisac, ein bisschen oberhalb von Pisac im Valle Sagrado. Die Begegnung mit diesem Flötenspieler, wie wir in unserer Familie sagen, kann ich mir so vorstellen, dass auf diesem kleinen Feldweg mein Vater mit dem Jeep gefahren ist und dann ausgestiegen ist und diese ganze Landschaft dort beobachtet hat, die sehr schön ist, und dann dieser Junge dahergekommen ist. Das Interessante ist ja auch, dass er nur eine Aufnahme gemacht hat. Und das war's. Dass jemand noch Musik spielt, währenddem er geht, in einer so natürlichen Weise, das finde ich etwas unheimlich faszinierend, was wir ja eigentlich gerne irgendwie in unserem Leben alle hätten, so diese Leichtigkeit des Seins, oder? Nach etwa 10 Tagen, nachdem er dieses Foto aufgenommen hat, ist er dann in den Anden tödlich verunglückt. Also war dieses Foto eines der letzten Aufnahmen, die er gemacht hat.
For a long time, it was the privilege of the rich. Until World War II, travel, by car, ship, rail or air, was a sign of wealth. But better transport, higher standards of living and the introduction of paid holidays put travel within everyone's reach. Mass consumption made tourism an industry, with the first charter flights and tour operators. In the 1960s, the beatnik and hippie movements helped to open up a new market. Baby boomers headed for California, Ibiza and Kathmandu. Tourism now taps into the third world, luring travellers with a taste for the exotic and the need to flee the industrial world. Tourism is more than a social phenomenon. 300 million people travel every year and spend $500 billion doing it. Werner Bischoff wanted to be a painter, but became a photographer. His work had both an aesthetic and a moral aspect.
Wenn man nur diese Foto kennen würde von Bischoff, bekäme man fast ein falsches Bild von seinem ganzen Oeuvre. Denn dann würden all die Bilder fehlen, wo er Not, Misere zeigt. Er kommt ja von der Objektfotografie her und dann kommt der Moment, Ende des Krieges, wie er in ein Flüchtlingslager geht, wie er dann plötzlich eine Welt kennenlernt, die nicht mehr übereinstimmt mit der Perfektion dieser Sachwelt. Und hier aber zeigt sich eben etwas doch, der bewusste Wille, die Welt in eine Komposition zu bringen, in Ordnung zu bringen. Also das Kind ist in der Mitte und das vertritt der gewisse Stolz der indianischen Rasse. Der geht in eine Zukunft hinein, wie auch immer. Die Foto wurde ja dann, eigentlich erst 10 Jahre nach seinem Entstehen, weltberühmt oder hat eigentlich dann eine ganze Generation fasziniert. Insofern einen Symbolwert dafür, dass sich, jetzt sagen wir mal, Europa oder die atlantische Welt sich öffnet gegenüber Lateinamerika und gegenüber der dritten Welt. Insofern kann man sagen, dass es das Bild einer Generation war, für deren Träume, aber auch für deren Illusion.
A week after Bischoff's death, Marco's brother Daniel was born. The photograph is an important part of the family history.
Also ich war ja damals 4-jährig und habe das eigentlich nicht so bewusst realisiert, dass mein Vater gestorben ist, sondern meine Mutter hat mir gesagt, dass mein Vater bei den Indianern geblieben ist und jetzt nicht mehr zurückkommt. Später ist es ja dann so gewesen, dass dieses Bild in unserem Esszimmer gehangen ist und quasi ständig präsent und wie ein Symbol war für den Tod von meinem Vater. 40 Jahre nach dem Tod von unserem Vater sind mein Bruder Daniel und ich sind zusammen nach Peru gefahren und sind an alle diese Orte gegangen, wo unser Vater gearbeitet hat, wo er verunglückt ist, wo er begraben ist und so. Und wir haben auch diesen Ort gefunden, wo dieses Foto gemacht wurde und es sieht total gleich aus. Wir haben natürlich auch versucht, den Jungen zu finden. Ich muss sagen, weil das Foto ein Sinnbild ist für eine ganze Stimmung, finde ich es eigentlich schöner, wenn dieser Bube oder dieser Mensch anonym bleibt und nicht in dem Sinn so personifiziert wird.
The search for love can turn us all into idiots. This idiot will make everyone else look like complete fools. Return of the Idiot, 10 o'clock, Tuesday.
Mais comment peut-on être aussi égoïste, hein?
Die bei Nacht entstehen und am Tag vergehen, sind meistens gar nicht wahr.
Je crois que je l'aime vraiment bien.
Weil sie unter den Millionen.
He's hopeless with the bat, but a genius with the pen. Toyota World Sports, the authority on sport.
Birds do it, bees do it, even randy chimpanzees do it. Let's do it, lesbian love. Animal homosexuality, the nature documentary that shows just how unnatural human ideas about sexuality can be.
What does all this mean for us?
8:30 Friday.
It begins as a small itch at the base of the spine. Within 3 weeks, it can become a full-blown tail. Special trousers are available, but are difficult to get into. Support groups are available. Social functions are available. Special armchairs are available. But watch out for automatic sliding doors.
The 2002 SBS Australian Almanac is now available with up-to-date facts and figures on the issues that make our history and shape our news. From travel and sport to science and politics. The SBS Australian Almanac, your comprehensive fact finder for Australia and the world, is available from Dimmicks, all good bookstores, online or phone 1300 305 999.
You disturb everyone with your bubbly attitude. And frankly, your initiatives are becoming a problem. Did I ask?
Telstra Call Waiting lets important calls through even when your phone's busy.
Excuse me, Mr. Boswell, I've got another call.
Just press Recall 2 to switch between callers.
Hello?
Jude, it's Alan. Congratulations, you've got the job.
Mr. Boswell, you know that filing you wanted me to do on my day off? I just finished.
Call Waiting. Just press Recall 2, it's free.
This program is brought to you by Telstra.
Hi. People are often frightened of science. Well, they're frightened of me and Dave anyway.
And the Aga Khan invited us to his youngest daughter's wedding in Monte Carlo. Oswald Boateng made me a marvellous suit, and we all popped over on Andrew's catamaran. It was a wonderful ceremony and a beautiful reception, and while we were posing for photographs, Damien Hirst shat in my pocket. Which was nice.
Morning, Paul. You all right? I see you've noticed the sling. I got this from a woman. Before you jump to any conclusions, Paul, I might add it was from her Volvo.
What, have you had an accident?
I have been to the brink of death and back in a 9-car pileup on the dual carriageway.
Really? What was that like?
Going to the brink of death and back in a 9-car pileup on a dual carriageway is very much like making love to a beautiful woman. First of all, brace yourself, hold on tight, particularly if it's a rear-ender, and pray you make contact with her twin airbags as soon as possible. Picture the scene, Paul. My horn is jammed on. All I can see is her Volvo coming at me at 120 miles an hour. My God, I thought, now I'm going to eat Volvo. And then, in I went with a terrific bang. Finally, it was all over. And I just lay there with a cracked big end, covered in leaking fuel, waiting for the emergency services to pull me out. Word of advice, Paul. Never try to light up a cigarette
after a 9-car pile-up.
I promise you, darling, I'll be the best husband you can ever imagine. I'll love you for the rest of my life, and I'll never look at another woman.
Make the most of it, sir.
Sorry, what?
Your high, tight scrotum, sir.
Sorry?
You're young, sir. You probably take it for granted, don't you, your scrotum? You think it'll stay snug and compact, a discreet little friend tucked behind your phenoblin pin forever. But take it from me, sir, in 40 years' time, it'll be down by your knees, wrinkled like Mother Teresa. Though I doubt it will have done as much good for mankind, sir.
Do you sell suits?
We sell little else.
Yeah, I need a suit, but I haven't bought one before.
Oh, your first suit, sir. Oh, it's a rite of passage, isn't it, sir? It's the first step towards becoming a man.
Do you hanker after the older woman, young sir? Suit you, sir.
What they lack in tautness, they make up for with enthusiasm, sir.
Suit you. And they don't have that off-putting, nervous look in their eyes, do they, sir?
You can easily overlook the cellulite, can't you, sir?
How old would you go, sir? Can I give you a tip, young sir? You can always tell when they're on the turn by the livery spots on the back of their hands. They never lie, sir.
Could you go for a really old one, sir?
The shaking hands might be fun.
Suit you, sir.
Perhaps you'd draw the line to dead one, though, sir.
Although you could try making a live one, take a cold bath and then lie very still for you, sir, whilst not breathing. Might be a novelty, sir.
Life's a permanent frustration, isn't it, sir? When you're young, you hanker after an older woman. When you're old, you hanker after a younger one.
But could you bear it, sir? Could you deal with that, sir? As an old man taking a young bride, having to show her your nakedness, your decay?
The skinny legs, the hairless scalp, the body like a giant soft egg.
Look, I only want a suit.
Sir, in our experience,
nobody only wants a suit.
Oh, ton shiny, shiny, cheap and cheesy, fabricato, sminky, pinky, Chris Waddle, Father Mucker!
Easy peasy, tiny shine. Father Mucker, tiny shine. Oh, Father Mucker, tiny shine. Father Mucker, tiny shine. Father Mucker.
Am you lost?
No. I've studied the maps and I intend to walk down towards that tree.
Lovely old tree.
Yes.
You're a brave man.
No. I've done this sort of thing many times before. I have no fear.
You should have fear. There's plenty of dogs with real vengeance in their hearts lives down there.
I'm a fully experienced rambling hiker. I always embark prepared. One blast on this old friend will seriously deter any fierce dog from tangling with me. I simply raise my hand like this. Absolutely terrifies them.
What about owls? There's plenty of owls round here. And badgers. What about badgers?
I simply raise my hand like this, lift my warning hooter to my lips, and...
What about a slithering thing?
What?
A slithering thing. It might be death. Slithering things often are. What use would your fancy crimson hooter be then? Eh? Hey? What about a slithering thing? With an owl?
Yes, thanks very much. I'll be on my way.
What about an eel? What about eels with mighty wingspan? Eels that can fly!
I was all in
morning. Tommy Pockets, what he didn't know about villainy, you could write on the back of a pack of crisps if you could write, which Tommy couldn't.
You mug, you muppet, you knocked your mug, you slag. Are you having a laugh? You having a bleeding laugh?
Then there was Davy Airbrush. You might call him the brains behind the operation, said he didn't have none.
Mug, you muppet, you're knocked you off.
You mug, you slag, you mug, you slag, you mug, you slag, you mug, you slag.
You mug, slag, you mug, slag, mug, slag, mug.
And you definitely wouldn't want to mess with the Cardinal.
You muppet, you mug, you're knocked, you sink for your money.
Boys, guns, nice suits, clubs and motors. But what about ladies? Well, they was never far away.
Go on, let's go and rob a bank. Oh, all right.
Can I take my top off now?
Then there was Cokey Dokey and Billy Brain Damage. They was just a couple of idiots. No one knew why they was in the film at all.
You must have put half a peckham up your hooter.
He must have shoved half the King's Cross up his nose.
He must have stuck half a tower hamlets up his hooter. It's because of you we got mugged up in the first place. What, that rotter? He turned up my cousin's funeral wearing white jeans. And I am very angry. The maggot. You sick. I shall kill you. George, put to the tour.
Starring Rhys Evans, Percy Purse, Tristram Public School Puff, Owen Unconvincing, Rhys Evans again, Kathy Burke and Graham Lasso. In It's a Right Royal Cockney Barrel of Monkey.
What do you think of the old internet, then? That's all bollocks, isn't it? What do you think of that old sushi, then? That's all old bollocks. What do you think of that old Mongolian barbecue?
Saturday nights, only on Discovery Channel.
Cape Town takes its name from the Cape of Good Hope, which was established as a sea route from Europe to India.
With The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck had become a household name. For a private man, such publicity was painful. Fame had also redefined his role as a writer.
There's a wonderful quote where he said, unless I can stand in a room and watch people and listen to people, I won't be able to gather material. I'll lose my craft, I'll lose myself.
Money gave John the type of respectability he had always disdained in his society parents, and drove a wedge between him and his wife, Carol. She began to drink heavily.
She had to work hard, and she was kind of pushing John. There was no question about that. And when the money started rolling in, I think it was hard for her to handle. Well, hell, it was hard for John to handle, too.
Although he could not bring himself to write a novel, Steinbeck was prolific in producing works that reflected his splintering interests: filmmaking, aviation, and marine biology. In the spring of 1940, John planned a sea expedition with his best friend Ed Ricketts to document Pacific sea life in the Gulf of California.
My father could put together these things that on the surface looked like totally ridiculous. I mean, take the Sea of Cortez expedition. Who would do it? I mean, but they always worked somehow. I mean, the nights before they were left, they were going out stealing mayonnaise jars out of the garbage to get enough bottles to put specimens in, you know?
The trip had a magical air about it. The days were filled with hunting and the nights with drunken revelry. Steinbeck later took Ricketts' notebooks and turned them into a log of the trip.
And Dad just marveled the way he could turn that trashy language of Dad's into just beautiful prose.
The boat plunged and shook herself, and rivers of swirling water ran down the scuppers. Below in the hold, packed in jars, were thousands of little dead animals. But we did not think of them as trophies, as things cut off from the tide pools of the Gulf, but rather as drawings, incomplete and imperfect, of how it had been there.
Carol had come along at her own insistence, and John resented it. He treated her as another crew member and let her sleep alone in the wheelhouse. Upon returning home, John reluctantly faced the piles of unopened letters and media requests. The studios were vigorously courting Steinbeck, whose strong stories adapted themselves perfectly to the silver screen. John took an active interest in the process of movie making and discussed it with new Hollywood friends, including Spencer Tracy, John Huston, and Charlie Chaplin, who had sought out the writer after reading his books. On one of his many trips to Hollywood, he also made the acquaintance of an aspiring singer named Gwyn Conger. He was 38, she was 20.
And she was sexy, and he felt deeply in love with her. But she was also wily. She had a different kind of intelligence than I think Carol had.
She was so young, and I was struck by how young and innocent she must have seemed to him. He made her almost, a heroine in his sort of new life.
Both Gwyn and Carol falsely claimed they were pregnant. Torn between the determined love of two women, John arranged a showdown.
In some way, John got the two of them together in their house in Monterey and said, I don't know what to do at this point. You two women fight it out.
In the short run, Carol prevailed, but it soon became apparent that the marriage was over. John and Gwyn moved to the Upper East Side of Manhattan and married in March 1943. With the war on, John felt that the world had gone mad. But he remained fiercely patriotic and determined to involve himself in the war effort. Getting his government's permission was another matter.
J. Edgar Hoover said, don't let him go into the services at all because he's he's a communist. And I longed to tell John that J. Edgar Hoover off hours wore a velvet dress and pearls.
At President Roosevelt's personal behest, Steinbeck toured bombing training camps and produced a book on the subject. Next, he wrote the script for Alfred Hitchcock's wartime allegory, Lifeboat. All of these efforts, however, kept him from the front.
I think he had to go to war in order to prove himself. It was as if he needed to see action.
In the spring of 1943, at the age of 41, John went to war as a correspondent for the Herald Tribune. For months, he traveled with the troops through North Africa and Italy. Throughout his life, Steinbeck loved to think of himself as a journalist, although he was more interested in emotional truths than facts.
My father said once, I don't lie, I just remember big. He had the journalist's eye insofar that he could step back from something, but he had something more, which was he understood motive.
When he returned, John was gaunt and in a state of semi-shock. Gwyn didn't recognize him when he walked off the boat.
He came back from the war very depressed. He was really too old to go to war. He couldn't take it.
While away, John comforted himself with memories of simple days spent talking and drinking at Ed Rickett's lab. For his next book, he tried to recreate those times in his fiction.
Cannery Row in Monterey in California is a poem, a stink, a grating noise, a quality of light, a tone, a habit, a nostalgia, a dream. Its inhabitants are, as the man once said, whores, pimps, gamblers, and sons of bitches, by which he meant everybody. Had the man looked through another people, he might have said saints and angels and martyrs and holy men, and he would have meant the same thing.
He loved writing about prostitutes and how wonderful they could be, which Edmund Wilson thought was, this is sentimentality. It was anti-respectability was what it was,
Other East Coast critics complained that the book lacked the social protest of earlier works. They were suspicious of Steinbeck's continuing mass popularity. John's favorite term for critics was lice. For the rest of his life, this rift would only grow.
For my generation, and we're certainly not the critics' darling, I went to Columbia where you were forbidden to utter the words John Steinbeck. American literature stopped with William Faulkner.
During the writing of Cannery Row, Gwyn became pregnant. On August 2nd, 1944, they had a son, Tom.
Having children was not one of his favorite things either. I mean, he just wanted to be a writer. My mother sort of snuck it over on him, as women have a way of doing, John, I'm 4 months pregnant. Well, why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't think you'd like the idea.
But Steinbeck did look forward to returning to a quiet domestic life. In the fall, he moved his new family back to his native state.
I was born on this coast. I was raised on it. We've been here a long time. My mother taught school on the coast. I've always thought of this place as a breeder of stories.
Following the war, John thought returning to Monterey would replenish his soul and feed his art. Instead, his homecoming was a disaster. The town fathers were less than welcoming. To them, he was a communist. Nobody would rent Steinbeck an office in which to work, and the city refused to turn on his gas main. People would cross the street rather than pass him on the sidewalk. And old friends, with the exception of Ed Ricketts, were no different.
By this time, he was very famous. He'd bring a jug of red wine, as he did in the old days. They'd be muttering to themselves, cheapskate. And then if he bought a bottle of Chivas Regal or something, they'd say, well, what a snob.
John wrote to his editor, Pat Covici, "California isn't my country anymore, and it won't be until I am dead. It makes me very sad." Dejected, the family moved back to New York City. John Steinbeck never called California home again.
On Biography, his raunchy humor made him comedy's bad boy.
He had the mind of a 10-year-old.
But this beloved gangster lived in a one-room apartment and chose a dark solitude.
It destroyed part of him.
Biography presents Benny Hill on the History Channel. He was made and died in Britain.
It goes without saying, changed the face of the earth.
He was a black musician with a white audience.
You know, we felt like he was ours.
An icon of protest who believed in the Vietnam War.
I can't express myself in, conversation.
To the tabloids, he was just another rock and roller with one foot in the grave.
He was kind of talking about maybe not living that long.
Biography presents Jimi Hendrix on the History Channel.
The end of World War II signaled what should have been one of John Steinbeck's happiest times. Cannery Row was a bestseller, and Gwyn was expecting their second child. Instead, his entire world was slowly falling apart. By the time John Steinbeck Jr. was born, the tension between his parents had grown thick.
As much as I loved my mother, she could be frightening when it came to cutting you off at the knees, and my father was a very sensitive man who wasn't going to take that for very long.
Just like his first wife, Gwyn began drinking heavily. Finally, their marriage reached a breaking point.
Gwyn divorced him and told him that she never had loved him, and that she'd had numerous affairs while they'd been married, and that their younger son was not really his.
Much of what Gwyn said wasn't true, but her words crushed his spirit. And in the midst of all this, the person John cared for the most was about to be taken from him. At twilight on May 7th, 1948, Ed Ricketts got into his old Packard and headed to the store. He never saw the express train coming in from San Francisco. As he lay teetering near death in a hospital, John struggled to get a plane west, saying, "The greatest man in the world is dying, and there is nothing I can do." By the time Steinbeck arrived, his best friend was dead. After 2 divorces, John was broke and at a low point. To make money, John turned his attention to Hollywood.
Viva Zapata! Viva Zapata!
In addition to writing Viva Zapata for director Elia Kazan, John produced screenplays for other films based on his work, such as The Pearl and The Red Pony. He also managed to start a light affair with actress Paulette Goddard. John was still trying to find himself when he met a visiting lady at a dinner party.
And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, now that I've met you, I'm going to see Steinbeck country. And he said, I'll show it to you.
The relationship worked from the start. Elaine Scott was the daughter of a Texas oil man and had worked as the stage manager on the original Oklahoma. She was also breaking up from her marriage to actor Zachary Scott. Gregarious and graceful, Elaine was the perfect foil for John.
They were a good vaudeville act. They were just fine. Elaine outgoing and talking all the time and keeping John where he should be and do this and do that. Never what she shouldn't be doing, but a great help to him.
The couple returned to New York's Upper East Side and were married just before New Year's 1951. John went to work on a novel he had been in training to write his entire life, East of Eden.
It was written directly from our personal histories, including the mother figure, including everything. I mean, it was all right there.
Your son, Aaron, he's everything that's good. Say hello to your mother, Aaron. Say hello to your mother! No!
East of Eden is both a retelling of Steinbeck's family history and an emotional venting of his recent past.
He's talking about genetics, inheritance, and he was really depressed because by that time, of course, he began to hate his second wife, and he was so worried his sons would inherit her traits.
How come you did it?
Did what?
Shot my father.
Because he tried to hold me. He tried to tie me down. Nobody holds me.
But I was really stunned when it came to the conflict within our own family, how close Steinbeck came to it.
As had happened in the wake of The Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck had to take a long break from his fiction. In 1955, the Steinbecks bought a house in the small port town of Sag Harbor, Long Island.
He said to me, when I was a child, I fell in love with the Pacific Ocean. Now I want to fall in love with the Atlantic.
I have a little house on the end of Long Island with a tiny bay and big oak trees and a little pier and a small boat that I can go fishing in.
Under Elaine's calming influence, John was coming out of his shell. They had a large circle of friends, and together traveled the world. Abroad, Steinbeck was a star, and the personification of America. In turn, John had an abiding respect for foreign cultures.
Frank Lesser brought back a small rock from the Forum. And John said, suppose everybody who went to the Forum would bring a rock. John usually had a marvelous sense of humor, marvelous. But do you know that the next time we went, John took the stone and put it back in the Forum?
What most captivated Steinbeck were the Arthurian legends he had loved since childhood. He spent most of the late 1950s working on a modern translation of Mallory's 15th century book On the Round Table. For most of 1959, John and Elaine lived in a small cottage in Somerset, England, where they toured local castles.
People forget that along with the social protests and the deep concerns about justice, there was also this very fanciful side to John, too.
The Steinbecks returned to find America in the midst of the quiz show scandal. Everything about the country seemed crass and foreign. Steinbeck felt that he had lost the pulse of the nation, and he knew he had to reconnect. Although he had been very ill, John planned a trip in a camper around the byways of the United States.
So one day he said to me, I have a terrible favor to ask of you. I said, yes. Well, he said, could I take Charlie? And I said, oh, What a marvelous idea. Now the truck is over here and you're sick. And Charlie can run and get help. He said, Elaine, I'm asking for Charlie, not Lassie.
John painted the name of Don Quixote's horse Rocinante on his truck. He put Charlie in the front seat and headed west. Just as he had done as a young man, John Steinbeck was on a quest to find the soul of America. John Steinbeck always loved dogs, and in Travels with Charlie, he turned his French poodle into one of the most famous canines in literature. What John and Charlie discovered on their 1960 trip was a country barely recognizable from what it had been a generation before. Under the book's sweet, nostalgic surface was a deep condemnation of modern America and its homogeneity.
Just as our bread, mixed and baked, packaged and sold without benefit of accident or human frailty, is uniformly good and uniformly tasteless, so will our speech become one speech. I, who love words and the endless possibility of words, am saddened by this inevitability. For with local accent will disappear local tempo. Localness is not gone, but it is going.
In 1962, on a long family trip around the world with his boys, John suffered an attack, later diagnosed as a stroke. One morning soon after his return, John turned on the television to hear that he had been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. It brought accolades from friends and readers, and daggers from critics. A New York Times editorial reiterated old charges that Steinbeck was sentimental, simple, and out of touch.
It hurt him a lot. Sort of like getting hit in the back of the head without expecting it.
John took the criticisms to heart. He never wrote another word of fiction again.
He was proud of what he did, but he was modest about it. And when they asked him in an interview, do you deserve the prize? He said, frankly, no. Now, think of somebody else who would have said that. You know, frankly, no. And of course he did.
In the fall of 1963, at President Kennedy's personal request, John and Elaine traveled to Russia as part of a cultural exchange program. KGB plants in the crowds questioned how an American dissident such as Steinbeck could be so patriotic.
Very simple answer. I told the truth about the United States in the 30s, because that's the way it was in the 30s, and I tell the truth about the United States now because that's the way it is now, and the problem is the people who run your country don't want you to know that worlds do change.
The new president, Lyndon Johnson, actively courted Steinbeck as a confidant. John responded enthusiastically and helped to write the president's speeches. The issue on everyone's mind was Vietnam, over which Steinbeck was torn between logic and loyalty to the president. By the end of 1966, Steinbeck had to see the war for himself.
I think it was largely curiosity. I've tried to look at nearly every important thing in my time because I think the future of not only of this part of the world, but of the whole world depends on pretty much on what happens here in the next few years.
The pictures of Steinbeck in green army fatigues helped to cement his pro-war image. What Steinbeck saw, however, was changing his mind.
I think my father might have come to understand that this time he'd sort of backed the wrong horse. But who knew? Everybody was lying to everybody.
Upon his return, Steinbeck wrote to his agent, "I know we cannot win this war." The public never knew of Steinbeck's change of heart. He was too sick to tell them. John accepted his failing health as another part of nature's cycle.
John and I were having a drink in this room, and out of a clear blue sky, John said, "Nobody should be buried in alien soil." And I said, "I hear you." Then I said, "I'll be buried in alien soil." He said, "But it won't be alien because I'll be there."
Even when he knew he was dying, he was raising a garden. And he was raising all these things he knew he'd never see them. his seeds and things. Had to have his hand in the soil.
John Steinbeck died the evening of December 20th, 1968. He was 66 years old. Elaine placed his ashes next to his father in the Hamilton family plot in Salinas, California. John Steinbeck remains the most read American author around the world. In his hometown, a museum has been erected in his honor. John's true legacy is the landscape he brought to life through his words, a place which is referred to as Steinbeck country.
You wouldn't know, my Charlie, that right down there in that little valley, I fished for trout with your namesake, my Uncle Charlie. And over there, see where I'm pointing? My mother shot a wildcat. Straight down there, 40 miles away, our old family ranch was, Old Starvation Ranch. Can you see that darker place there? Well, that's a tiny canyon with a clear and lovely stream bordered with wild azaleas and fringed with big oaks. In the spring, Charlie, when the valley is carpeted with blue lupines like a flowery sea, there's the smell of heaven up here. The smell of heaven.
On Biography.
War is always a terrible thing.
He was an average kid from the streets of New York. Some say he lacked direction. Then, one day, he put on a uniform.
I suddenly found something that I liked doing. More importantly, I did it well.
From the battlefield to the political arena.
I am an American, first and foremost, and I am very proudly a black American.
Biography presents Colin Powell on the History Channel.
The picturesque past comes to life as Parramatta, Australia's second oldest town, celebrates the 150th anniversary of its settlement. On the lawn of Old Government House, ladies parade in frocks that were in fashion when Waterloo was news. Little girls were little ladies then. Sweet smiles under nodding plumes and a provoking pout under a bonnet. Coal scuttles and Gainsborough hats for coy coquettes of the colony. Governor Macquarie and his lady come out to welcome guests to a garden party as Parramatta's moderns recall the old town's long-gone gaieties. The Old Government House with its graceful portico is a rare example of early colonial architecture. Macquarie and his successors made Parramatta the social centre of the period, and it almost became the colony's capital. Among the guests at this historic levee are descendants of our early pioneers. So Parramatta recalls with pride the colourful scenes of early Australian history.
The lonely swagman with his four-footed friends. Who said they were four-footed? Mac Macready on the Wallaby track in Queensland has trained his dogs to walk like men, and they like it. They like to sit round the campfire too and puff a pipe with the boss. And Mac has taught them to affect the effective affection.
The dog will get up and love the big dog. Bounce, get up and love Jim. Now kiss him.
He has also taught them the art of jumping through a hoop, and a very little hoop at that. Another trick is to walk on the forepaws, that is to say, two paws, namely the forepaws. You wouldn't believe a dog could be taught to skip, that is, unless you were Mac. So take a hint from Macready, and when things are tough on the track, try a trick or two.
The Honourable R.G. Casey.
National insurance aims to wipe out worry. It is therefore everybody's business. This scheme, just a beginning, guarantees on top of old age and invalid pensions, free doctor, free medicine, sick pay, widows and orphans' pensions. A tremendous insurance, and as I tell you, only a beginning. It will cost the worker 1 and 6 a week, his employer as little. A woman, 1 shilling, employer and employee. The rest, the Commonwealth Treasury pays.
Bring it on! TV1's cool summer competition is here. First prize, happiness is winning that choice of any car from the Hyundai range. Yes, you get to choose from the funky new Elantra Levita, the stylish new Sonata family sedan, the exhilarating Santa Fe all-wheel drive, or the versatile Trajet V6 people mover to the value of $45,000. Second prize will leave you breathless with a double dose of aquatic action. A cool-ass Zodiac inflatable boat powered by a Mercury 15 horsepower outboard motor, 4 Quicksilver life jackets, and a very cool dry-clad flexi pool. Total second prize value $11,562. Third prize, go to the movies at home with this Sony home cinema system, comprising a Cinesa home cinema projector and stand, a DVD dream system with 5 satellite speakers and subwoofer, and 50 latest release Columbia TriStar DVDs. Total third prize value $10,379. To enter, all you have to do is name the cool summer premiere show seen weeknights at 8:30 on TV1 Channel 1 and call 1902-988-111 and register your details or log on to the TV1 website. Enter now, don't miss out. TV1's cool summer competition. All thanks to Hyundai, Zodiac, Dryclad, Sony, and the coolest summer vacation station across the nation, TV1 Channel 1.
The incredible chase for Norway's gold. History Channel International travels the globe to let you experience the world before us. One of the most remarkable adventures of World War II began right here in Oslo at the Bank of Norway in April of 1940. Nazi invaders were determined to get their hands on Norway's immense gold reserves, but patriotic Norwegians were just as determined to prevent that. And so began an incredible 2-month game of hide and seek. The Nazi invasion took neutral Norway by surprise. The Norwegians fought back bravely, but the onslaught proved virtually unstoppable. When the German invaders reached Oslo, a detachment headed toward the Bank of Norway. The prize they were after, 53 tons of gold stored in this vault. Gold that would be valued at over $1 billion today.
I mean, the first thing the Germans did after the bombing was to come to the Bank of Norway to get in touch with the gold. But there was no gold in the bank.
George Stabel and others had been working feverishly through the early morning hours to load the gold onto a convoy of trucks. Then they headed out on a daring run to Lillehammer.
Germans started the bombing, so we moved with the car into the woods. You haven't time to be afraid.
The gold was hidden in Lillehammer, but it wouldn't be safe there for long. A trusted young official named Frederick Hasland was given the seemingly impossible task of smuggling it out of the country.
I think he was a very good organizer. And also I think they recognized this very strange ability he had to make people do what he wanted them to do.
With the Germans at their heels, the resourceful Hasland and a hand-picked group of Norwegians commandeered trains, trucks, even old fishing boats. They hid the gold in bombed-out buildings, drove it through burning streets, and ferried it across fjords at night.
The Germans enjoyed complete air superiority during the campaign, so it was a very hazardous operation, great dangers.
Eventually, they reached the port city of Molde, where a British destroyer was waiting to transport the gold to England.
And they managed to get some of the gold aboard, but the whole town was burning, so it was very difficult.
German attacks forced the ship to sail with only half the gold aboard. The docks were in flames. German troops were near, and all seemed lost.
I think he might have had some worries at that time.
But Hasland and his crew refused to give up. They loaded the remaining gold onto fishing boats and began to thread their way north along the Norwegian coast.
Absolutely a very courageous thing to do. That's surely one of the most critical phases of the whole operation.
Poet Nordahl Grieg, one of those helping Hasland, wrote later about their decision to keep going.
In a strange way, we felt our fate was bound up with the gold. We had guarded the crates, like some female animal protecting its young. Our cargo had its own secret life. It would enable Norway to buy arms, resurrect its army to regain its freedom.
After a harrowing journey by sea, they reached the remote town of Tromsø, where they loaded the gold on board another British ship. Not a single gold bar had been lost. The all-important gold eventually served two vital purposes. It was used to finance resistance to the German occupation and help rebuild once the war was over. The heroic effort is considered by many here one of Norway's proudest moments. But Hasland was so modest about his accomplishment, his own daughter didn't find out about it until years after the war was over.
And a friend at school came to me and said, "Look, wasn't your father the leader of something gold thing? Carrying some gold?" And I said, "I don't know."
Your mother never told you?
Nobody told me.
Your father never said anything?
Nothing. And I went home and I asked my father, "Did you have anything to do with this gold transport?" And he said, yes. And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, I sort of arranged it."
A great number of people did a great job without any thoughts of being rewarded. Just did it because this was the only decent thing to do. If one should use the word hero, there are lots of everyday heroes here.
For History Channel International, I'm Giselle Fernandez.
When I grow up,
there was just something magical about her.
She was good-natured, cheerful, irrepressible, and she knew at every moment exactly what she was doing.
She's what you call a perfect 10.
Her songs, her dancing, they made millions and millions of Americans feel good about themselves.
Hallelujah, spinach, stay away from my door.
Why not relax with a great movie? Showtime has our own Kate Blanchett joining John Cusack in the air traffic comedy Pushing Tin. Encore stars Robert Redford and George Segal in the elaborate caper The Hot Rock. World Movies has a delightful comedy about the chaos of live telly in Shout Out. TCM has Private Detective Philip Marlowe on the case, and later on the Disney Channel, Herbie the lovable Volkswagen goes to Monte Carlo for some fun and adventure. Mystery, action, comedy, sit back and relax with your movie choice.
The following program is classified PG. The History Channel advised parental guidance is recommended for persons under 15 years.
On the 21st of November 1915, 28 men were shipwrecked in the most desolate place in the world. Cast adrift thousands of miles from civilization, their journey to safety was one of the greatest survival stories in the history of exploration. A journey that would have meant certain death for all of them if it hadn't been for the determination of one man, Sir Ernest Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton set sail on his ship Endurance in 1914 at the outbreak of the First World War. His aim, to cross the Antarctic continent by foot. The story of his expedition is so remarkable that if it had been published as fiction, it would have met with the criticism that such things don't happen in real life. But incredible adventures were something that Shackleton was destined for.
I always had a feeling that I was preparing myself for something. I dreamt prodigiously about big things ahead, big things in the nature of adventure. I must have been about 18 when I remembered about how there was a Cape Shackleton away in the North Pole, and how as a child I'd loved stories of polar adventures from the illustrated London News. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to be an explorer.
Ernest Henry Shackleton was an explorer in the classic mould, utterly self-reliant, romantic, and just a little bit swashbuckling.
Shackleton definitely was my hero. I think above all heroes, he was the one that impressed me most.
No other explorer in that age ever went back 4 times. There was enough hardship for most people just to go once.
I think that there are a breed of people that are, you could almost say, natural-born survivors that have got a tremendous instinct for survival, and I think Shackleton was like that.
The ship Endurance, named after the Shackleton family motto, "By endurance we conquer," was reputedly one of the strongest wooden ships ever built, ideally suited for the icy conditions in the Southern Ocean. On board were 28 men and 67 sled dogs, all under Shackleton's command. The crew had entrusted their lives to Shackleton, and he had a reputation for putting his men first. He was also a good leader, if an unconventional one.
Shackleton didn't really fit into the typical Edwardian heroic mold of explorers. He wasn't brought up in a hierarchical, structured, maybe middle-class English village. He was brought up in a small village, close to a small village in Ireland where, you know, everybody would have mixed with everybody. And I believe this influence sort of permeated, came through in Shackleton's character. That sort of flexibility, the openness, the honesty. And you weren't dependent on society's outward structures to make your way in life.
Shackleton joined the Merchant Navy at 16 years old, working his apprenticeship on square-rigged sailing ships in the treacherous seas round Cape Horn. It was there that he developed his taste for adventure, a flair for leadership, and an ability to remain calm in difficult circumstances. But he wasn't just a hardy sailor. Life at sea appealed to his romantic nature. He loved poetry and was inspired by the optimism of Browning and Kipling. And his years at sea fueled his passion for the wide open spaces and the freedom and challenge they offered him.
I remember how as a small child my mind was haunted by the sea. The very word for me meant an unreasoning passion. It was the sea that kept calling me at school. It always rang in my mind with the thought of freedom. I wanted to be free.
But he was always on the lookout for new challenges. As he grew older, life in the Merchant Navy appealed less to his flamboyant nature. It was replaced in his affections by exploration. In 1901, he joined an expedition to Antarctica with Robert Falcon Scott, and his love affair with this icy continent began. If he could find success in this great wilderness, it would open the door to fame and fortune. In 1911, Norwegian Roald Amundsen claimed the South Pole, beating Robert Falcon Scott by almost a month. Scott and his men died on the journey back. Now there was only one prize left for any self-respecting polar explorer.
It is the last great polar journey that can be made. It will be a greater journey than the journey to the pole, and I feel it is up to the British nation to accomplish this, as we've been beaten to the North and South Poles. Then now remains the largest and the most striking of all journeys, the crossing of the continent.
The expedition was audacious. If it hadn't have been, it wouldn't have appealed. But this was the heroic age of exploration, where the competition was between man and nature, and man and the limits of human endurance. It could be said that the expedition was for the greater glory of Shackleton, but that would do him a disservice. He was motivated by the spirit of adventure. Antarctic exploration appealed because it was a challenge.
Being on a mountain or being in the Antarctic is a very uncomfortable business. It's cold, miserable, the wind blows, you're often short of food, you sometimes get lost. A good deal of the time is not very pleasant at all. The only reason you have for going there is to overcome those problems.
The Antarctic is a strange mix of beauty and misery. It is white, it's cold, it's empty, it's boring, it's hard work. But it's also an open space of huge dimensions. It has huge skies, beautiful mountains. It's an odd place with an odd attraction.
The appeal of the Antarctic to Shackleton, it was the challenge of unexplored territory, I think, above all. And then overlaid on that was the sheer magic of the place. And I think he was very inspired by that challenge, or maybe a struggle with nature, if you like.
They headed south into the Weddell Sea, hoping to land the shore party at Vassal Bay. Shackleton had taken along an Australian photographer, Frank Hurley, to film the expedition. But what he ended up filming was not what Shackleton or his crew expected. Battling through the pack ice, the ship headed for the landing site where they would start the continental crossing. But Shackleton and his team would never set foot on the Antarctic continent. "80 miles short of their destination, the sea completely froze over. The men tried to cut a path through the ice so the ship could pass, but this was a lost cause. The Endurance was stuck fast. As the ship's storekeeper wrote in his diary, we were frozen like an almond in the middle of a chocolate bar. There were two possible outcomes to this disaster. The expedition would continue if the ice broke, or the pressure of it would crush the ship. All they could do was sit and wait.
I'd this time, if fortune had smiled upon the expedition, we would have been comfortably and securely established on our shore base. But now, it is not easy to forecast our future. We may be able to reach a suitable spot to attempt the overland journey next year, but time alone will tell. I do not think any member of the expedition is disheartened by our disappointment. All hands are cheery, and in the meantime, we must wait.
Being trapped must have been a bitter disappointment for Shackleton. At 40 years old, in debt from the trip, he knew this would be his last opportunity for a great polar journey. But that was not all. Shackleton knew this was a potentially lethal situation. The fate of the Endurance was unknown to the outside world, and they would remain prisoners of the ice for the long Antarctic winter. Shackleton knew the problems of being in such a remote place. On his last expedition in 1908, he had walked to within 100 miles of the South Pole, the furthest south any explorer had been. He had to turn back or lose his men. Because of that, he became a national hero. But that added to the pressure. His position in society was not assured. It depended on him continuing to shine as a personality, and he needed to come back with a success. His position and his livelihood depended on it.
Shackleton has been called a fortune hunter. To me, I'd like to put it differently. He was a great entrepreneur. He was always thinking up of schemes to raise money, because he was always short of cash, either to pay for the last expedition or to pay for the next one. I always feel that he'd have a wonderful time with credit cards. It would have solved a lot of his problems.
War is hell. The weapons.
This has got to be the largest naval fleet that's ever been assembled anywhere.
The soldiers.
Recruiters showed up and said, boys, the country needs you, and off they went.
We didn't have a real grasp of what the reality of the war had been.
In Vietnam, there was no clear mission.
The horrors.
The bodies were stacked like cordwood.
They saw us coming all the way.
We lost almost our whole company.
It's either him or you.
The whole company of 380 men was wiped out.
Go behind the lines. Weapons at War on the History Channel. Screen legend Fred McMurray.
How tall a man is doesn't matter.
Except to short guys.
One of television's wisest men.
When I have a kid of my own someday, I think I'll be able to talk to him sensible and smart like you talk to me.
With the help of Uncle Charlie, he led three lads through the pitfalls of adolescence.
You know, root beer, singing, popcorn.
And didn't raise his voice once.
I'm getting really excited about this whole thing.
It's a much-loved part of television history. My Three Sons on Fox Classics.
In man's quest to overcome distance, the motorcycle has played a special role. No mere machine this. No utilitarian collection of nuts and bolts. To the men who live to ride them, their motorcycles have always been more than a noble steed. A companion in travel, a mistress of the open road. All a motorcycle needs is a rider to make it complete. The History Channel presents Mark of a Legend, Ikes.
If there was going to be any chance of attempting the crossing the following year, he would have to give his men no cause for alarm. So ship's business carried on as usual. The crew began to prepare the ship for the months ahead, storing seal blubber for fuel and penguin meat. But working in these conditions isn't easy.
A big part of the challenge in doing anything in such an environment is psychological rather than physical. And to make yourself keep moving day after day, well, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, it's very, very hard indeed. And I'm sure that, at least half, if not more like 3/4 of the strength you need is in your head. Spending time with the other people on expeditions can be a source of stress. There's a lot of interpersonal pressures on you. On the one hand, you've got these tensions. On the other, you're also relying on each other, and you have the most incredible strength in camaraderie.
The fact that the crew were kept occupied added to the feeling of contentment that pervaded the ship. Shackleton remained the image of cheerfulness, optimism, and calm. But in private, he must have been worried. Of all the enemies, the cold, the ice, the sea, he feared none more than demoralization.
Strong leadership is my only weapon. On that depends the sanity of my brave companions.
He was part of a society that believed in dignity and restraint. He had got his men into this predicament, and he would get them out through grim determination, if nothing else.
To show the British stiff upper lip is the only way that I can see that we have a chance of surviving.
If the crew became depressed or lost faith in their leader, they would not pull together. If they did not pull together, they would all perish. For the next 11 months, the ice drifting on ocean currents dragged the ship further away from land. With every day, Shackleton's crossing of Antarctica became more and more unlikely. But somehow, the months of waiting drew the men closer together. Despite the cold, the meager rations, and the diet of penguins, the months passed almost enjoyably. Shackleton made sure of that. Each man was assigned a group of dogs to look after and exercise. The tough old sailors fussed over the dogs. It fulfilled that basic human need to care for something, the desire to express tenderness in a barren place. There were poetry readings, musical evenings, and games.
A few days ago, Captain Worsley amused the men by running out onto the floe in a state of nature.
It seems boys will be boys, whatever the circumstances.
Today, a morale boost was needed again, so I asked Captain Worsley for the honor of a dance. We waltzed on the ice while the crew whistled. Morale was soon up again.
The crew, I think almost without exception, had very deep affection for Shackleton because he understood them. And the other thing was he was very good at bringing out the best in people. So he encouraged people very positively. And he, I think, encouraged people to do things that they didn't believe they were capable of. And in terms of just sheer courage and endurance, some of the crew members, I'm sure, far exceeded their own expectations of what they could put up with under those appalling conditions.
Entertaining distractions could not hide the fact that the ice had been increasing its grip on the ship. One night, a band of penguins approached the Endurance and gave an eerie cry. Some of the more superstitious of the crew felt that this was an omen. The pressure of the ice had become too much for the little ship. She was breaking up. The Endurance had been a symbol that linked them to the outside world. Its breakup severed their last link with civilization.
It was a sickening sensation to feel the decks breaking up under our feet. The great beams bending and then snapping with a noise like heavy gunfire. Her timbers cracking and her wounds gaping, she slowly gave up her sentient life at the very outset of her career. I cannot describe the impression of relentless destruction that was forced upon me as I looked down and around. The floes, with the force of millions of tons of moving ice behind them, have annihilated my ship. It's hard to say what I feel. To a sailor, his ship is more than a floating home.
Shackleton's grand expedition was over, but his great adventure was just beginning. He at once set a tone that was reassuring.
A man must make himself a new mark directly the old one goes to ground. So, gentlemen, ship and stores are gone, so now we'll go home.
But home was on the other side of the world, and even the nearest human settlement lay thousands of miles away. Shackleton. They loaded 3 lifeboats with stores and started to tow them across the ice, hoping to get to open water. The plan was to get to Paulette Island, 350 miles away, where there were supplies and there may be a chance of rescue.
Towing sledges, each person, each one of us, was pulling around 500 pounds. And to drag that takes all your effort, even on the flat. And it's not flat. For Shackleton, to the same extent, flat out, basically. You get terrible sores around the top of your legs, around your armpits, your toes get frostbitten and infected. Your feet then get swollen and your boots don't fit anymore. It's really very uncomfortable indeed for a lot of the time. And because of that, you weaken physically as days go by. If you're keeping moving, you can sustain things. When you stop, it's misery.
But they had no choice. They had to stop. The boats were too heavy. They would have to trust their lives to chance and set up camp on the drifting ice.
The ice drifting northwards will either take us nearer land, or we will be swept into the South Atlantic. The monotony is unbearable.
But after 3 months drifting, there was no sight of land or open water, and food was running out. For Shackleton, a man of action, doing nothing was the ultimate frustration.
Waiting, waiting, waiting.
He had never lost a man under his command. To keep that record would be the last ambition to be salvaged from disaster.
I pray God I can manage to get the whole party to civilization.
The remaining dogs, the crew's loyal companions, were shot and eaten. For many of the men, despite their awful condition, this was the lowest point of the journey. But after 4 months drifting hopelessly, the ice began to break up.
One of the ice floes split down the middle through someone's tent, a guy called Holness. He dropped straight down into the icy waters of the Antarctic. Someone grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, or by the sleeping bag. Middle of the night, who was watching? Shackleton. So I think they knew that he'd always look after them.
At least they could now launch the boats and head for Paulette Island. They were all overjoyed that at last they could escape from the ice. But the current took them past Paulette Island into stormy seas. A hellish 7-day journey followed, but finally they stumbled onto the beach at Elephant Island. They had not set foot on land for a year and a half. They were ecstatic.
History Channel International presents International Dateline. During the late 11th century, Pope Urban II declared a religious war that sent armies of European knights marching to Jerusalem in the First Crusade. In the highlands of Peru, the Incas founded their capital city of Cuzco. And China's Sung dynasty was perfecting inventions like the mechanical clock and the magnetic compass years before they appeared in the West.
Roll that dice, Sean. Here we go.
Hold on to your hats. The Dice Man is rolling into America.
Thank you.
It's not often that we get some British rednecks.
Crossing the cultural divide.
We must be completely bog.
And letting a roll of the dice decide their destiny.
You've just demonstrated why the world would never know the truth.
You can tell we're getting desperate now, can't you? I'm afraid I've been a naughty boy again.
Quick! Smile, smile, smile.
The Dice Man Does America. Saturday night on Lifestyle.
Some of the men were reeling about the beach as if they'd found an unlimited supply of alcoholic liquor. They were laughing uproariously, picking up stones and letting pebbles trickle through their fingers like misers gloating over hoarded gold. The smiles and laughter and the gleeful exclamation at the sight of 2 live seals on the beach made me think of that glittering hour of childhood, when the door is open at last and the Christmas tree in all its wonder bursts upon the vision.
On solid ground, many of the crew thought they were safe at last.
In March this year, I had my first view of Elephant Island. I can't say it was a pleasure. Historically, yes, but I've never seen such a godforsaken lump of rock in my life. I saw it about 5 o'clock in the morning. We had very rough seas. It was sort of shrouded in mist. And it is very hard to understand the fantastic excitement which Shackleton and his crew displayed when they actually set foot on land there.
But it soon became clear that the island was so isolated that no rescue team would think of looking for them there. They would all go insane or starve. After 5 days in awful conditions, there was only one course of action. Someone would have to go for help.
April 24th, 1916. We began our fateful 800-mile journey across the South Atlantic in winter to the nearest human settlement on South Georgia. On this, all our lives depend.
As experienced seamen, they all knew that this trip was suicidal. The 20-foot James Caird was barely fit for such a journey. Shackleton took 5 men, leaving behind the rest of the crew. Many thought they would never see the 6 men again. Sailing across the stormiest seas in the world to find the small island of South Georgia would require incredible skills of navigation.
The tale of the next 16 days is one of supreme strife amidst heaving waters. The sub-Antarctic Ocean lived up to its evil reputation, the ocean that is open to all and merciful to none, but threatens even when it seems to yield and is pitiless to weakness.
One night they encountered a wave so huge, it blotted out the sky.
During 26 years' experience of the ocean in all its moods, I had never encountered a wave so gigantic. It was a mighty upheaval of the ocean. A thing quite apart from the white-capped seas that had been our tireless enemies for so many days. I shouted, "For God's sake, hold on, it's got us." Then came a moment of suspense. It seemed drawn out into hours. We felt our boat lifted and flung forward like a cork on a breaking surf. We bailed with the energy of men fighting for life. After what seemed like hours of uncertainty, we felt the boat renew her life beneath us. She floated again, dazed by the attack from the sea.
When you sail down the South Atlantic to say around 40 degrees south, the further you go into the Southern Ocean, you can feel the coldness coming on. It gets very, very cold. You've got these mountainous seas that's got no land in front of them, so they just keep rolling around Antarctica. You've got these big storms that build up off of Antarctica and roll out into the Southern Ocean, which create massive waves, which can be incredibly dangerous. If you could imagine driving along the motorway and you go under a motorway bridge, and if you could imagine that that bridge is 3 times or 4 times higher into the sky, and that's a wall of solid water, of sea, rushing at you, it would be terrifying for anybody, and not many people can live through it. And all you can do in those kind of conditions is hope for the best.
During the harrowing journey, they were followed by an albatross. The ease with which it swept the miles aside filled them with envy. But finally, on the 8th of May, they spotted land. They had reached South Georgia. But as they approached the island, a hurricane blew up and pushed the battered boat towards the cliffs.
The chance of surviving the night with the driving gale and implacable sea forcing us onto a lee shore seemed small. I think most of us had the feeling that the end was very near.
But the same good luck that spat them out of the monster wave struck again. At the last moment, the wind veered round and blew them away from the cliffs. On the 16th day, they landed in South Georgia, ending one of the greatest small boat journeys in seafaring history.
I understand that somebody said, 16 days, it wasn't all that long. But I don't think they really understand what 16 days in the Southern Ocean is all about. 16 days in the Southern Ocean is like 16 light years in the universe. When you consider that 16 days of continuous battering by mountainous seas, freezing cold, high winds, your navigation has got to be as right as it can. And any moment you can have one of those 100-foot waves come along and just swallow you up, and you've gone. 16 days is surely a lifetime.
As they stepped ashore, they all shook hands. But they had landed on the uninhabited side of the island. The whaling station still lay 30 miles away, and the only way to safety was to cross the island by foot. Shackleton and his men had no maps, no mountaineering equipment, and they were exhausted.
I have been to South Georgia, and there are some pretty impressive mountains there. However, I don't really think that the route followed by Shackleton would be regarded as a difficult technical route by the modern mountaineer. But to people who'd just sailed across the ocean, who were tired, washed out, and not terribly experienced, it must have been a tremendous challenge.
Having come this far, they were not going to give up.
I think a lot of it really is motivation. If you simply want to get there and have to get there, you'll make the effort using what equipment you have. That's really what Shackleton did. He wasn't equipped to do such a thing, but he did have that strong motivation. A man who would take risks when they had to be taken.
I know that during that long and racking march of 36 hours across the unnamed mountains and glaciers, it seemed to me that we were 4, not 3. I said nothing to my companions at that point, but afterwards, Worsley said to me, "Boss?" I had a curious feeling on the march that there was another person walking with us. Crean confessed the same idea. All 3 of us felt it.
Shackleton's extra man, as they cross South Georgia, is a phenomenon that's been described by other travellers that have undergone extreme hardship for a long time. I can't say I've ever felt it myself, and I guess it's a kind of daydream, but I don't know of any medical explanation as to why another person should appear.
I always remember we went to Shackleton's hut on Scott Island. I opened the door of this rather shabby little hut and went inside, and I immediately had a strange feeling. I had a feeling as though I could see Shackleton walking across the hut towards me with his hand outstretched to welcome me. And it really was an amazing sensation. And the other people who were with me, when they came in, they had a similar feeling. They really felt that the Shackleton spirit, perhaps, was still there waiting to welcome us. It was really an amazing experience.
You're known as a petty thief. You become the mastermind of the most daring robbery in England's history.
That's how you become one of the big boys, by doing the things that the other people won't do.
In Search of History presents The Great Train Robbery on the History Channel. Something magical has happened to the Entertainment Plus package on Foxtel.
We are totally grateful.
FX, the History Channel, the Comedy Channel, and Hallmark have been joined by the Disney Channel. Now the most loved characters and the finest movies for all the family can be yours all the time. For a whole new world of family entertainment, have your pin handy and call 131 999 now. On Modern Marvels.
Necessity is the mother of all inventions.
It's the 21st century. Life should be easier. So forget the snow shovel, let a friend mow the lawn, but cook your dinner the old-fashioned way.
About 25,000 years ago, man discovered fire, and later that same day, he discovered barbecue.
Test drive some of this world's garage gadgets on Modern Marvels on the History Channel.
They scaled 3 high peaks only to find there was no way down and had to retrace their steps.
Finally, at the top of one of the mountains, with night falling, I realized that if we didn't get down rapidly, we would all freeze. There was only one thing for it. Slide.
Shackleton didn't allow them time to reflect on the danger of this. But in minutes they descended a mile and came to rest in a snowdrift. Early next morning, Shackleton heard a distant sound. It could be the wake-up call for the whaling station. If he hadn't imagined it, he knew it would sound again at 7 o'clock and confirm they were close to safety.
In intense excitement, we waited for 7 o'clock when the whalers would be summoned to work. It was a moment hard to describe. Never had any of us heard sweeter music.
This was the first sound of the outside world they had heard in 17 months. Later that day, on the 20th of May 1916, after a 36-hour trek, 3 bedraggled strangers walked into the whaling station at Stromness, South Georgia. Shackleton and his men were safe at last.
It was a splendid moment.
I've always had the attitude that if you've got yourself into a difficult situation, it's not really much good praying for someone to get you out of it. I think it's up to you to make a major effort and get yourself out of that difficult situation. I'm inclined to think probably that Shackleton had a similar approach.
Shackleton collected the 3 men on the other side of South Georgia and then made 3 attempts to rescue the men on Elephant Island, but he was driven back every time by the ice. He was terrified that the crew would all die of starvation before he could reach them.
The mind boggles as to how they managed to survive those 4 months, and they were winter months. I mean, they could have eaten each other, or they could have done all sorts of horrible things. Wilde was in charge, so Shackleton, second in command. He was left behind. Every day he got them up, they could pack up their belongings and get ready, and said, you know, the boss may come back today. The boss was the name they gave to Shackleton. And again, there was this air of expectation, hope, optimism, which I think saw them through. I don't think they actually believed that Shackleton wouldn't come and rescue them. which was great. I mean, that kept them going, I think.
By August, with no news, there was a creeping awareness that the boss was never coming back. One of the men wrote in his diary, "It's no use deceiving ourselves any longer." But on the 30th of August 1916, a boat sailed into the bay at Elephant Island. As Shackleton rowed ashore, he thought he might be too late.
I saw they'd hoisted a flag, an old Burberry shirt, but it was flying at half-mast, so I shouted, "Are you all well?" And the reply came back, "All well, boss." I could barely speak for the sense of relief. The feeling of seeing all 22 of my men alive was indescribable.
Two years after they had set sail on the Endurance, they returned to civilization and were hailed as heroes. But time had stood still for Shackleton and his men. In their absence, the world had gone mad. The 28 men had survived against all odds. Yet within weeks of their return, 2 of them had been killed in action. One shot at the front, the other drowned when his ship was torpedoed. The First World War ended the heroic age of exploration and changed the notion of heroism forever. After the war, Shackleton grew restless, and so in 1922 he headed south again on a 4th Antarctic expedition. Many of his old crew went with him. This is the last photo taken of Ernest Shackleton. He died of a heart attack on his ship off South Georgia.
I think the Antarctic was calling him back again. So he organized an expedition, which one just wonders, did he know it was going to be his last expedition? He wasn't in good health, although he didn't really show it. Maybe he knew he'd never come back. I mean, we don't know, he didn't say that, but his ending was highly appropriate. There couldn't be a better burial ground for him amongst the Norwegian whalers who respected and admired him so much, under the shadow of those big high mountains which he crossed in South Georgia.
Ernest Shackleton failed completely at his expedition's original objective, but he had done much more. His story is not one of imperial triumph, but of human survival and human endurance.
Just when things look their worst, they change for the best. I marvel at the thin line that divides success and failure.
To my mind, and I think to most people who know anything about polar exploration, Shackleton is a hero. He's undertaken incredible feats, some of them sort of by accident, if you like, but I think probably stands above everybody else, really, even if he didn't ever attain the goals he wished to make.
I think it helps to be a slightly lucky person. But on the other hand, I don't think it's all luck by any man of means. I don't think, for instance, that Shackleton survived just on luck. I mean, he survived because he was a brave man. He was a man with courage and good judgment, a man who was determined to get his team to safety.
And that was the achievement that mattered to him most.
Not a life lost. And we had been through hell.
There is a saying amongst explorers: for scientific discovery, give me Scott. For speed and efficiency, give me Amundsen. But when disaster strikes and all hope is gone, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton.
He was the last of the universal men.
I think he inspired people.
Those who looked at any phenomenon.
To be aware that a comprehensive view goes beyond measurement.
And said why, how.
The travel was part of the process of understanding.
And what.
He was always on the brink of finding larger answers.
He knew it in his heart. He was destined for adventure. Wilderness Men presents Alexander von Humboldt on the History Channel.
Parramatta Jail is on the alert as notorious escapee Darcy Dugan is reported missing. He's escaped from custody 4 times, and as the alarm sounds, warders are reinforced and all police leave stopped. Trucks are searched as they leave the jail, for police are certain Dugan is still inside the prison walls. But with 5 acres of grounds to search, more and more police are called in. Dugan's been missing for 8 hours and darkness is approaching. Detectives under Detective Sergeant Ray Kelly are prodding the grounds with crowbars in an inch-by-inch search. And at 6:30, the search is successful. Detective Hemming of Parramatta found Darcy Dugan hiding under a shed, and he's taken to Long Bay. This is the man who has escaped from custody 4 times and has made many unsuccessful attempts. Again, he's failed, thanks to the New South Wales police. Darcy Dugan, the 37-year-old criminal, serving a life sentence for attempted murder, is still behind iron bars. He has a debt to pay to society, and police are determined he'll pay that debt in full. Despite heavy rain, 700 Boy Scouts end a long trek in the snowy mountains, crossing the flooded Tumut River and arriving at Tumut Pond Dam, which is still under construction. The Scouts' snowy venture celebrates the Jubilee year of Scouting and the centenary of Lord Baden-Powell's birth. The hike's taken them over rugged country and they see the giant snowy scheme at first hand. A good time to see it too, as long-awaited rains swell the rivers. Into the underground power station in the Tumut Valley, climax of a hike that combines adventure with a close-up look at a great Australian enterprise. 3 men are injured and 2 escape when a Navy helicopter nosedives 30 feet onto a ledge overhanging a 500-foot drop. The helicopter's power failed and it hit the trees and stopped right on the edge of a precipice on Mount Newfoundland near Grafton. Commander Hardcastle, despite injuries, scrambled 4 miles through rough country to get medical aid for the injured crew. 1 man, Naval Observer Giles, had a fractured pelvis and an able seaman was also admitted to hospital. Rescuers risked falling into the valley below as they treated the men who were hurt. The helicopter is wrecked and the crew are lucky to be alive. Hey, what are the brooms for, fellas? Scared the train wheels will get a bit grubby? Blimey, I'm dead right. There's a plague of the creepy crawlies. There are big fat caterpillars and little kitten pillars, and they're awfully squashy under train wheels. They have to be swept off, otherwise the train suffers squashed caterpillar traction. And on an uphill grade, that means no go. Watch this one in the grip of the grubs. Don't worry, folks, it's only Victoria's caterpillar army marching on its stomach. We'll get those sweepers back on the sleepers, and you'll be off again in no time at all. Greasing the wheels of progress is one thing, rubbing the wheels of the spirit of progress is another. You caterpillars will give train drivers butterflies in the stomach. Remember the floods and the gallant work of the police and army men who saved scores of lives? The police haven't forgotten the floods either, and 18 volunteers complete a course in flood relief on Sydney Harbour. In their final exercise, the police take out a flood boat on an army duck. A timed exercise to show how fast they could launch the craft in an emergency. Here is Australia's newest swimming sensation. Keep your eyes on the girl in lane 3. 13-year-old Ilse Conrad's competing in the state 880 yards championship. She's swimming so easily, it's hard to realize that she's going to topple 2 world records. Ilse touches and turns just ahead of Dutch distance star Corrie Schimmel. It's close at the moment, but not one of her opponents can keep up with the child champion's display of sustained pressure. Ilse's starting to draw away now, though she still seems as relaxed as in a training swim. And she's on the way to smashing Lorraine Krapp's world records for the 880 and the 800 meters by 17 seconds. A 13-year-old who's already a sensation. Turning for the last lap, some 10 or 15 yards ahead of Corrie Schimmel. And watch this final killing length of the pull as she thrashes the water and literally streaks away. Don't worry about that other girl, Ilse. She's still got 2 laps to go, and you're at the end of the fastest half mile any woman in the world has ever swum.
On specials. Covert operations behind enemy lines. It's dirty work. It's the most sophisticated and most dangerous kind of cat and mouse game in the world. They go in with finely honed techniques to gather intelligence and maximize fire, then get out fast. A complete story of the Green Berets on the History Channel.
You've got a great choice for viewing right here. Fox Sports has live and exclusive play from the 4th One-Day International between India and England. The Disney Channel takes an in-depth look behind the scenes of Inspector Gadget in Movie Surfers. The National Geographic Channel premieres The Python Quest in Croc Chronicles. Enjoy a performance from Jeff Lang live at the Basement on Music Country, and UK TV has some late-night laughs on offer with the Queens of Comedy, French and Saunders. Every day, great stars, great choice. Enjoy.
The following program is classified PG. The History Channel advised parental guidance is recommended for persons under 15 years.
This is the continuing story of 10 families in 3 generations who went in search of the American dream. By the 1950s, their country was the richest the world had ever known. And for many, the dream seemed a reality and not just an aspiration. But some Americans were excluded from this material world. In the South, things were very different. The 1960s would see Americans facing each other in crisis and confrontation. From the Dust Bowl to the Internet, from the Depression to the boom years, this is the story of the American dream. In 1963, in the South, an old world was dying. And a new one was struggling to be born.
We had certain rules and regulations for civil rights workers. You could not ride in the car by yourself. Do not be caught outside of your territory at nighttime. Always lock your doors when you get into a car. It was a frightening thing to be in the South at that time. Our rights were already written in the books, in the Constitution, that we should have the right to vote. But yet and still, we were not in South Africa. We were here in the United States. And we're supposed to be protected by the U.S. Constitution. But we were engaged in a war at that time.
Marion Ross was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She was a 16-year-old high school student when she joined the civil rights movement.
I wanted to be a part. And my mother would always warn me, listen, you're down here to go to school, to not get involved. Well, you know, that went in one ear and out the other. I was always a rebellion type of little person. I was the only girl among three boys at the time. So I had to fight my way into a lot of things.
In 1964, Marion's fight was for equality. It was Freedom Summer, and the aim was to register black votes.
We'd start early in the morning and be walking door to door. We went on plantations. We went back up in the woods. See, you don't never know about the people that live back up in the woods. They were glad to see us, glad to learn about this, and they wanted to participate. We registered thousands.
I do think that every citizen in the Mid-County should participate in an election. And I hope and trust that I will have the privilege to vote once or twice in my life.
I was quite proud of them. Not only did they organize in Jonesboro, but people in Bogalusa, Louisiana decided, hey, if Chilly Willie and them could do it in Jonesboro, we can do it in Bogalusa.
Bogalusa, Louisiana, Selma, Alabama, St. Augustine, Florida. All over the South, people were challenging the old order. Some came from the North to join the struggle.
1964, local Negroes began civil rights demonstrations with white and Negro sympathizers from the North participating. City and county officials arrested more than 250 persons, including Mrs. Malcolm Peabody, mother of the governor of Massachusetts.
I got news that happened to my mother from the governor of Florida. I had warned him that my mother was coming to Florida, and he said, Governor, don't you worry, we'll take good care of her. And then he called me one day, he said, Governor, I'm sure sorry to tell you, but your mother's been arrested. I can arrange to have her bailed for as little as $10. And I said to him, good luck, Governor. He received an enormous amount of hate mail.
There were boxes of them. The usual thing, you know. Would you like your daughter to marry a black man or your son? And there were quite a few of those.
The Peabodys were one of the most established families in America. Endicott Peabody II, Chubb, married Tony Gibbon during the war. In 1964, Chubb, a Democrat, was governor of Massachusetts.
My family always taught me that to serve him is perfect freedom. And public service is the acme of service. And so when I arrived here, I felt I was stepping into one of the greatest offices in the world, and I pledged myself to serve the Commonwealth and the people, regardless of how it might affect me.
My mother was arrested attempting to obtain equal rights for all American citizens, something which she feels deeply.
After 5 days in the St. Augustine jail, Mrs. Peabody returned home to Boston, triumphant. For Northern liberals, these were the glory days. And in 1964, Chubb himself was part of a confident establishment led by President Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson is the biggest nigger lover in the United States.
Amen.
He may think that he can use the Army to force us white people here in St. Augustine and other parts of the nation to mix up with niggers, but if he sends troops in here and puts a bayonet behind every one of us, we still will not mix up with a bunch of black savages.
The night before the election of Lyndon Baines Johnson, there were cross burning across the whole South. The Klans had made their campaign to try to put fear in the people before they would go out and vote the next day. But the only thing they put in people was the determination to kick their butts through the ballot box.